The gunshot split this Texas night before Eleanor Hayes ever saw the ranch she'd come to save. She'd traveled 2,000 miles to teach two orphaned children, believing education could heal grief, that compassion could tame wilderness. But as her stagecoach crested the final hill, flames painted the horizon orange, and a man's roar of fury cut through smoke-thick air. Cole Riker, the foreman who'd kill before he'd let her civilize his world. The war had already begun. She just didn't know it yet. If you're ready to witness a battle where survival meets salvation, where the frontier's most dangerous man faces the one woman who refuses to run, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let's begin. The stagecoach wheels screamed against rock as the driver yanked the reins, and Eleanor Hayes gripped the worn leather seat, her knuckles white beneath black travel gloves. Through the window, the Texas landscape sprawled endless, a brutal canvas of burnt gold grass, skeletal mesquite, and sky so wide it felt like falling upward. "Ma'am, you sure about this?" The driver's voice carried doubt, thick as the dust coating his beard. "Boone Ranch ain't no place for a woman?" Eleanor cut him off, her Boston accent sharp and clean in the western air. "I've heard that before, Mr. Calloway, in 6 states, from 12 different men. I'm still here." Calloway grunted, but his eyes held something harder than skepticism. Pity, maybe, or the look of a man watching someone walk toward a cliff. "It ain't about what you got between your ears, miss. It's what this land takes out of everyone. Been 3 governesses in 2 years. None lasted a month." Eleanor straightened her spine, adjusting the cameo brooch at her collar. Her mother's, worn smooth by time and grief. Then perhaps they weren't sufficiently motivated. "Motivated?" Calloway spat tobacco juice into the wind. "Lady, the Boone children ain't your average pupils. Their mama died birthing the girl, their daddy in a stamping 2 months back. They're half feral, and the man running that place—" He stopped himself, jaw working like he'd swallowed something bitter. "Cole Riker," Eleanor supplied, pulling the telegram from her reticule. The paper was creased from reading. The words burned into memory. "Children require immediate instruction. Lodging and meals provided. $20 monthly. Inquire Silas Boone, Boone Ranch, Texas." Below that, in different handwriting, rougher, "Don't come. We don't need you. CR." That second message had arrived 3 days after the first. Most women would have stayed home. Eleanor had bought a ticket south. "Mr. Riker made his position clear," she said. "Fortunately, he's not the one who hired me." Calloway shook his head, slowing the horses as they descended into a valley where the air grew thick with something acrid. "Silas Boone hired you. Cole Riker runs the place. There's a difference, and you're going to learn it quick." The smell hit her then. Smoke, but wrong. Not the clean burn of cook fires, but the greasy, animal reek of something dying in flame. "What is that?" Eleanor pressed a handkerchief to her nose, eyes watering. "That," Calloway said grimly, "is your welcome." They rounded the final bend, and Eleanor's breath stopped. The Boone Ranch sprawled across a natural bowl in the hills, a main house of weathered timber and stone, surrounded by corrals, outbuildings, and a long bunkhouse that leaned slightly windward. It should have looked peaceful in the evening light. Instead, it looked like a battlefield. A barn at the property's eastern edge was fully engulfed, flames licking 50 feet into the darkening sky. Men swarmed around it like angry ants, hauling buckets from a well, shouting orders that tangled into chaos. Horses screamed in a nearby corral, rearing against the fence. And in the center of it all, directing the firefight with the precision of a military commander, stood a man who could only be Cole Riker. Even from a distance, he dominated the scene. Tall, taller than any man Eleanor had seen in Boston's refined circles, with shoulders broad enough to block the sun and movements that spoke of coiled power barely restrained. His shirt was plastered to his back with sweat and soot, sleeves rolled to reveal forearms roped with muscle. Dark hair fell past his collar, pushed back from a face all angles and hard lines, a jaw shadowed with several days' growth. He was, Eleanor thought with clinical detachment, exactly the type of man her father had warned her about. Dangerous, untamed, and completely unconcerned with civilization's niceties. "Get that north wall soaked!" His voice carried like a whip crack, deep and commanding. "Jesse, move those horses upwind before they break their necks. Martinez, if that roof comes down and you're under it, I'll kill you myself." "Charming," Eleanor murmured. Calloway pulled the stagecoach to a stop near the main house, well clear of the chaos. "You can still turn around, miss. I'll take you back to town, no charge. Tell Boone you got sick. Tell him anything. Mr. Calloway." Eleanor gathered her carpet bag and straightened her traveling jacket, checking that the small pistol in her pocket hadn't shifted during the ride. Her father's gift before she'd left Boston. "You're going to a hard country, Ellie. Be harder." "I signed a contract. I keep my word." She stepped down before he could argue further, her practical boots, purchased specifically for this journey, sinking slightly into dust that felt more like ash. The heat from the burning barn washed over her in waves, and the noise was tremendous. Crackling flames, shouting men, terrified animals, and beneath it all a sound like the earth itself groaning. A timber beam collapsed inside the barn with an explosion of sparks, and the men jumped back, several cursing. "Pull back, ye!" Cole Riker's voice cut through the confusion. "It's gone! Focus on keeping it from spreading." Eleanor started toward the main house, intending to find Silas Boone and announce her arrival properly, but a small movement caught her eye. Two children stood on the house's wide porch, nearly invisible in the gathering dusk. A boy, perhaps 10, wearing clothes too large for his wiry frame, and a girl, no more than 7, clutching a rag doll with one hand and her brother's shirt with the other. They weren't crying. They weren't even moving. They just watched, with the blank, haunted eyes of creatures that had learned tears changed nothing. Eleanor's chest tightened with recognition. She'd seen that look before, in the mirror, after her own mother's death. She changed direction, climbing the porch steps with deliberate calm. The children tracked her movement but didn't retreat, didn't speak. "Hello," Eleanor said softly, crouching to their eye level despite the dust it would leave on her skirt. "My name is Miss Hayes, Eleanor Hayes. I've come from Boston to be your teacher." The boy's jaw tightened. "Don't need a teacher." His voice was rough, trying for menace but landing somewhere near desperation. The girl said nothing, but her grip on the doll tightened until Eleanor could hear the fabric strain. "I see." Eleanor nodded seriously, as if he'd made a profound observation. "What do you need, then?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. His eyes, blue like winter ice, flickered with something uncertain. "Need? Need Pa back. Need Ma." His voice cracked. "Need things that don't." "Thomas." The girl's whisper was barely audible. "Don't." Thomas's face hardened again, shutting down like a door slamming. "We don't need nothing from you, lady. Other teachers all left. You will too." "Perhaps," Eleanor held his gaze. "Or perhaps I'm more stubborn than they were." "Jesse, where the hell is—" Cole Riker's voice, closer now, pulled Eleanor's attention. She straightened, turning as he strode toward the porch, his face black with soot except where sweat had cut clean streaks. He moved with the fluid power of a predator, each step purposeful, and when his eyes locked onto Eleanor, they were the color of gunmetal and just as hard. He stopped at the porch steps, looking her up and down with an expression that mixed irritation, exhaustion, and something close to disgust. "You're the teacher." It wasn't a question. Eleanor lifted her chin. "Miss Eleanor Hayes, yes. Mr. Boone isn't here." Cole's voice was flat, dismissive. "Rode to Austin 3 days ago, won't be back for a week. Convenient timing, hiring help then running off before they arrive." He glanced at the children, and something in his expression softened fractionally before hardening again. "Kids, get inside. It's nearly dark." "But the fire," Thomas started, "is handled. Inside. Now." They obeyed instantly, disappearing through the door without argument. Eleanor watched them go, noting the practiced obedience, the way they moved like shadows trying not to be noticed. When she turned back, Cole was watching her with the same assessment he might give a horse he suspected was lame. "You should have stayed in Boston, Miss Hayes. I'm aware that's your opinion, Mr. Riker. You made it clear in your telegram." Eleanor kept her voice level. "However, I signed a contract with Mr. Boone, and I intend to fulfill it. Contract. He laughed, a sound without humor. You think a piece of paper matters out here? You think those children need to know geometry and Latin while rustlers are burning our stock and half the ranch hands are one bad season from leaving? I think, Eleanor said carefully, that those children have lost everything that gave their world meaning. And I think education, structure, purpose, hope for a future beyond mere survival might be exactly what they need. Cole's jaw worked, a muscle jumping beneath the stubble. You don't know a damn thing about survival. I know more than you might think, Mr. Riker, and I know that teaching children only to survive, to fear and fight and mistrust, is its own kind of death. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or recognition? Then it was gone, replaced by the same stony mask. Barn burning down is your welcome party, he said flatly. Rustlers hit us tonight, ran off 15 head, and lit the hay storage on their way out. That's the third raid in 2 months. We've got drought threatening the water supply, hands quitting faster than I can replace them, and a ranch owner who thinks running to Austin solves problems. He stepped closer, and Eleanor fought the urge to retreat from the sheer physical presence of him. So forgive me if I don't have time to play pretend about literature and arithmetic, while everything I've built is falling apart. Everything you've built? Eleanor kept her ground. Or everything their father built? The children I'm here to teach? It was a shot in the dark, an intuition based on the way he'd looked at the kids, the possessiveness in his voice. But it hit home. Cole's expression went dangerously cold. You don't know anything about Cole. A man ran up, breathing hard, his face streaked with ash. North fence is on fire now, wind spreading it. Cole cursed, a word that would have made Eleanor's Boston friends faint, and wheeled away without another word. Within 3 strides, he was barking orders, organizing the men, attacking the new crisis with the same ruthless efficiency he'd shown before. Eleanor stood alone on the porch, exhausted from travel, surrounded by smoke and chaos, facing a job that apparently 3 other women had fled. She picked up her carpet bag and walked inside. The main house was larger than it appeared from outside, built with the practical eye of someone who understood that Texas weather could kill as efficiently as any enemy. Thick stone walls kept it cool, wide windows, now shuttered against the smoke, would provide cross-ventilation, and the furniture was sparse but well-made. A central room served as kitchen and living space, with doors leading to what Eleanor assumed were bedrooms. The children had vanished, but she could hear soft movement from behind one of the closed doors. She set down her bag, noting details with the trained eye of someone who'd taught in 7 different households. Books on a shelf, but dusty, untouched. A woman's shawl draped over a chair, placed there with the careful reverence of a memorial. Dishes in the dry sink, washed but not put away. The work of someone who completes tasks but takes no joy in them. They don't like strangers. A voice from the doorway made Eleanor turn. An older woman stood there, Hispanic, with silver-streaked hair and eyes that had seen too much. I am Maria. I cook, clean, try to keep those 2 from becoming wolves. She gestured at the closed door. You are the teacher, see? Eleanor Hayes. She extended her hand, and Maria shook it with a grip that spoke of decades of hard work. I arrived at an eventful time. Every time is eventful here now. Since Senor Boone died, since rustlers smelled blood in the water, since... She stopped, choosing her words carefully. Since everything changed. Tell me about the children, Eleanor said. Please, I need to understand what I'm walking into. Maria moved to the stove, stirring a pot that sent up steam smelling of beans and chilies. Thomas is 10, smart boy, but angry. He was close to his father, and when Daniel Boone died... She shook her head. The girl, Lily, is 7. She stopped talking for 2 months after her father's death. Speaks now, but only whispers, only to Thomas. And Mr. Riker? Maria's expression shifted, becoming unreadable. Cole? He was Daniel's foreman, his friend, best horseman in 3 counties, could track a ghost through stone. When Daniel died, Cole tried to hold everything together, the ranch, the business, the children. She paused, her voice dropping. But grief makes people hard, and Cole was already hard to begin with. He seems to think I'm wasting everyone's time. He thinks anything that doesn't involve work is wasting time. Books, music, teaching, these are luxuries. Cole Riker does not believe in luxuries. Maria ladled stew into bowls. But he is wrong. Those children need more than survival. They need reasons to survive. Eleanor felt something loosen in her chest, the first hint that she might have an ally in this hostile place. Can you tell me about the previous governesses? First one lasted 2 weeks, left after finding a rattlesnake in her bed. Second lasted a month, couldn't take the isolation. Third, Maria's mouth tightened. Third left after rustlers raided while the men were away. She was unharmed but terrified. Thomas heard her tell Cole that the children were unteachable savages and she wouldn't stay in this godforsaken wilderness for any amount of money. She met Eleanor's eyes. Thomas has not trusted an adult since. Eleanor absorbed this, understanding clicking into place. So when I try to reach them, they're waiting for me to leave like all the others. See, and Cole, he does not want them to hope. Hope hurts when it dies. The door to the children's room opened slightly, and Thomas peered out, his face suspicious. Is she really staying? That depends, Eleanor said before Maria could answer. Are you going to put a snake in my bed? Thomas's eyes widened fractionally, surprise at being called out. Then, incredibly, the corner of his mouth twitched upward. Ain't no snakes around right now. Wrong season. Good to know. I'll watch out for them in spring then. She pulled out a chair at the rough-hewn table. Come eat, both of you. I imagine it's been a long day. For a moment, Thomas hesitated, clearly torn between maintaining his defenses and the simple pull of hunger and human connection. Finally, he pushed the door wider and stepped out, Lily drifting behind him like a ghost. They sat. Maria served the food, and for a few minutes there was only the sound of spoons against bowls and the distant shouts of men still fighting the fire. You really from Boston? Thomas asked finally, his tone suggesting Boston might as well be the moon. Born and raised. Have you studied geography yet? I could show you where it is on a map. Don't need maps, not going anywhere. Everyone goes somewhere eventually, even if it's just in here. Eleanor tapped her temple. Maps teach us the world is bigger than what we can see, that there are places where different rules apply, different possibilities exist. Thomas's spoon stopped halfway to his mouth. You sound like Pa. He always said... His throat worked, and the sentence died unfinished. Lily touched his arm gently, and he cleared his throat, shoving more food in his mouth to avoid continuing. Eleanor let the silence settle, not pushing. Her father had taught her that. Sometimes the most important teaching happens in the spaces between words. Outside, the shouting had diminished. Either they'd contained the fire or decided it was a lost cause. Eleanor found herself listening for one voice in particular, that deep, commanding bark that had cut through chaos like a blade. Cole says teachers are useless, Thomas announced suddenly, as if daring her to argue. Says book learning don't help when you're facing down a grizzly or a rustler. Says the only thing that matters is being tougher than whatever's trying to kill you. Mr. Riker has a very specific philosophy, Eleanor said diplomatically, though I notice he's quite proficient at organizing men and solving complex problems under pressure. Skills that require intelligence, not just toughness. He don't read, though. Saw him burn a whole box of books last winter. Said they were taking up space. Eleanor's fork paused halfway to her mouth. He burned books? Yes, ma'am. Uncle Silas got mad, but Cole said if they weren't being used, they were just kindling. Thomas's eyes gleamed with the satisfaction of having shocked her. Still think you can teach us? I think, Eleanor said slowly, carefully, that Mr. Riker and I are going to have some very interesting conversations. The front door banged open, and Cole strode in, bringing the smell of smoke and sweat with him. His eyes swept the room, landing on Eleanor at the table with the children, and something in his expression closed off even further. Kids, bed, now. But we ain't finished, Thomas started. Now. They obeyed again. That same instant compliance, grabbing their bowls to take with them. Lily paused in the doorway, glancing back at Eleanor with something that might have been curiosity or might have been goodbye. When their door closed, Cole poured water from a pitcher, drank deeply, then faced Eleanor with his arms crossed. You're sleeping in the room off the kitchen. Maria will show you. You'll wake at dawn, help with breakfast and chores before any teaching starts. The children have responsibilities on this ranch. They're not Boston gentry with idle hands. I wouldn't expect them to be, Eleanor said evenly. However, regular lessons will require, you'll get what time I can spare, which won't be much. He moved to the window, looking out at the dying glow of the fire. We lost the hay barn, 40 tons of winter feed. That's a disaster we'll be paying for when the cold comes. Rustlers are getting bolder, which means I need every man armed and alert. I don't have time to play nursemaid to a Boston schoolmarm who thinks Shakespeare matters more than survival. Eleanor stood, her chair scraping against the floor. I notice you keep using that word, survival, as if it's the highest aspiration you can imagine for those children. It's the only aspiration that matters. He turned, and in the lamplight, Eleanor could see the exhaustion etched into every line of his face, the weight he carried like armor. You want to know what happened to their father? He was checking fence lines in a thunderstorm because he was worried about the stock. Lightning struck him, killed him instantly. He survived 10 years of war, 20 years of building this ranch, and nature killed him in a heartbeat. His voice was flat, but something underneath vibrated with barely controlled fury. That's what this land does, Miss Hayes. It doesn't care about your education or your refined sensibilities. It will kill you, and it won't even notice. So your solution is to teach them to fear everything, to trust nothing, to believe the world is only brutality and loss? Eleanor kept her voice quiet, but let steel enter it. Because from where I stand, Mr. Riker, that's not survival. That's just slow death with a heartbeat. For a long moment, they stared at each other across the dim room, two wills colliding like thunderheads. You won't last a month, Cole said finally. Then you have nothing to worry about. Eleanor picked up her carpet bag. Maria, would you show me to my room, please? Maria, who'd been watching the exchange with the attention of someone witnessing a chess match, nodded and led Eleanor through a narrow door into a small space that had probably once been a pantry. A cot, a trunk swag, a single window facing east. Sparse, but clean. He's not a bad man, Maria said softly as Eleanor set down her bag. Just a broken one, and he does not know how to be anything but hard. I met plenty of hard men in Boston, Maria. They wore silk instead of leather, but the principle was the same. Control through intimidation. Eleanor unpinned her travel hat, setting it carefully on the trunk. The difference is, those men were cruel by choice. Mr. Riker strikes me as cruel by necessity, or at least what he believes is necessity. You see much for someone just arrived. I've been teaching for 8 years. You learn to read people quickly when your safety depends on understanding the household you've entered. Eleanor sat on the cot, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. Tell me something, Maria. Why did the children's uncle hire a governess if Cole runs everything? Maria's expression grew troubled. Silas Boone is complicated. He is Daniel's older brother, inherited the ranch when their father died, but he was never interested in the work. Daniel managed everything, and when Daniel died, the ownership stayed with Silas, but the control, the real power, went to Cole. She lowered her voice. There is tension there. Silas wants to sell the ranch, move to the city. Cole and the children want to keep it. A lawyer in Austin is reviewing Daniel's will, trying to settle who has the final say. So Silas hired me to, what? Prove the children need civilizing? Create a reason to claim Cole is unfit to guide them? Perhaps. Or perhaps he felt guilty for not being here and hired you to ease his conscience. With Silas, it is hard to know. Maria moved to the door. Rest, Miss Hayes. Tomorrow will be difficult. Maria? Eleanor stopped her before she could leave. Thank you for being kind. Wait until tomorrow to thank me. You may hate me for not warning you to run. When she was gone, Eleanor changed into her nightdress and lay on the narrow cot, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling for the night. Men's voices as they bedded down in the bunkhouse, horses snorting in the corrals, the distant howl of something wild in the hills, and beneath it all, through the thin walls, the sound of a child crying as quietly as possible, trying not to be heard. Eleanor closed her eyes, her father's words echoing in memory. You're going to a hard country, Ellie. Be harder. Tomorrow, she would begin. Dawn came like a slap, light spearing through the small window with the force of an accusation. Eleanor woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of men moving, boots on floorboards, low voices discussing the day's work. She dressed quickly in the practical clothes she'd brought, a simple cotton dress that could withstand dirt and work, her hair pinned severely back. The small pistol went into her pocket. Always. The main room was already bustling. Maria, at the stove, cooking what smelled like eggs and bacon. Cole at the table, bent over papers, a cup of coffee steaming at his elbow. 3 ranch hands Eleanor hadn't met yet, eating quickly with the efficient focus of men who understood time was money. No sign of the children. "Morning," Eleanor said, and every head turned. The ranch hands, young men, 2 white and 1 Hispanic, all wearing expressions of barely concealed curiosity, nodded. Cole didn't look up. "Coffee's on the stove," Maria said. "Help yourself. Breakfast in 10 minutes." Eleanor poured a cup, black, and carried it to the table, deliberately sitting across from Cole. He continued studying his papers, some kind of ledger, filled with numbers and notes in a cramped, efficient hand. "The children will need a schedule," Eleanor said. 3 hours of structured lessons daily, minimum. Reading, writing, arithmetic, history, basic science. 2 hours, Cole said, not looking up. "After morning chores, before midday meal? That's what you get. 3 hours is standard. This isn't Boston. 2 hours or nothing." He finally looked up, his eyes hard. "And before you argue, understand. Those children work on this ranch. Thomas helps with the horses. Lily collects eggs and tends the garden. They contribute or they don't eat. That's how it works. They're children, not indentured servants. They're ranchers' children. There's a difference." He turned the ledger toward her, pointing at a column of numbers, all in red. "See this? That's debt. The ranch is bleeding money, and every mouth to feed matters. I'm not running a charity, Miss Hayes. Everyone pulls their weight, including you." Eleanor studied the numbers, her mind working. "These supply costs are excessive. Who negotiates your contracts?" Cole's expression flickered with surprise. "Silas handles purchasing." "Well, he's being robbed. You're paying 40% above market rate for feed, 60% for lumber. Either your supplier is cheating you, or Mr. Boone is taking a cut." She traced a line down the page. "If you renegotiated with a different supplier, there's a mill outside San Antonio that could cut your lumber costs in half." Cole stared at her. "How do you know that?" "My father was a merchant. I grew up reviewing his accounts, understanding supply chains and pricing." She met his gaze steadily. "I may not know how to birth a calf or track rustlers, Mr. Riker, but I know numbers, and these numbers are killing you slowly." For a long moment, he said nothing, just looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Reassessment, perhaps, or the grudging acknowledgement of an unexpected asset. 2.5 hours, he said finally, "for lessons. But you help Maria with accounts going forward. If you can actually save us money, that's worth more than geography." Eleanor hid her satisfaction. "Agreed." "Cole!" A shout from outside, urgent. "Tracks by the north fence, fresh, maybe an hour old." Cole was moving before the sentence finished, grabbing his rifle from where it leaned by the door, already issuing orders. "Jesse, Martinez, with me. Carlos, keep the horses ready. If we're not back by noon—" "Wait!" Eleanor stood. "The children. If you're tracking rustlers, they shouldn't be alone." "They won't be. Maria's here, and Carlos." He was halfway out the door. "Though I doubt rustlers are dumb enough to hit a ranch in daylight." "You doubted they'd burn your barn too, I imagine." That stopped him. He turned back, jaw tight. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that if 3 of your men are gone, that leaves this ranch vulnerable. And if those tracks are meant to draw you away." She let the implication hang. Cole's eyes narrowed, calculating. "You read tactics?" "My father survived the war by being paranoid. He taught me to think like the enemy." Eleanor kept her voice level. "I'm not saying it's certain. I'm saying it's possible." Cole turned to the ranch hands. "Carlos, you and Jesse track. I'll stay. Martinez, you're on watch, high ground, eyes open. Anyone approaches who's not supposed to be here, you fire a warning shot and yell like hell." He looked at Eleanor. "Get the children. Keep them inside until we know what we're dealing with." The men dispersed like smoke, and Cole moved to the window, his body tense with readiness. Eleanor found the children in their room, Thomas already dressed, Lily struggling with her shoes. "There might be trouble," Eleanor said calmly. Mr. Riker wants everyone inside for now. Thomas's face went white. Rustlers? Maybe. Maybe nothing. But we're going to be careful. She helped Lily with her shoes, her movements gentle but efficient. Have you practiced what to do if bad men come? Thomas nodded jerkily. Pa made us, he made us practice. We got a hiding place in the cellar. Food, water, candles. Lily knows to be quiet. Good. Show me, so I know too. He led them through the kitchen, where Maria was already packing supplies with the smooth practice of someone who'd done this before. A trapdoor beneath a rug opened into a root cellar, larger than Eleanor expected, with shelves of preserved food, and in the corner, a space big enough for a child to hide behind the crates. Pa said if rustlers come, they take horses and cattle, not people. But if they come in the house, we hide. Thomas's voice was steady, but his hands shook. Cole said never make a sound, never come out until someone we know calls for us. Eleanor crouched down. That's good advice, but I don't think it'll come to that. Mr. Riker is very cautious, and sometimes caution means being prepared for things that never happen. Things happen here, Lily whispered, her first words to Eleanor. Bad things happen. Yes, Eleanor said, because lying would be worse than acknowledging the truth. Bad things do happen, but so do good things. And right now we're safe, and we're together, and that's what matters. A gunshot cracked through the morning air, and Thomas grabbed Lily's hand instinctively. Eleanor's heart hammered, but she forced herself to move slowly, calmly. That's the warning shot Martinez was supposed to fire if someone came. Let's go see. They emerged from the cellar to find Cole already at the door, rifle ready, his face grim. Through the window, Eleanor could see a rider approaching. No, 2 riders. The first was Silas Boone, older than Cole by perhaps 15 years, softer around the middle, wearing a city suit that looked absurd in the ranch setting. The second rider made Eleanor's instincts scream. He was tall, lean, with the weathered face of someone who'd spent decades in the sun and wind. But it was his eyes that set her on edge, cold, assessing, the eyes of a man who calculated value and weakness in the same glance. That's Boone, Cole said, not lowering the rifle, and his new business partner, Jack Crowley. You don't like him. I don't trust him. Crowley's a land speculator, buys up struggling ranches and flips them for profit. He's been sniffing around for months, and now Silas brings him back from Austin? Cole's jaw tightened. Nothing good comes from this. Silas dismounted, waving cheerfully as if he hadn't just caused a near panic. Cole, lower that damn rifle before you shoot me by accident. Cole lowered it fractionally. We had tracks. Thought you might be rustlers. In broad daylight? Don't be paranoid. Silas's eyes found Eleanor, and his smile widened. Ah, you must be the governess. Miss Hayes, is it? Delighted you made it safely. I apologize for not being here to welcome you properly. Mr. Boone. Eleanor nodded politely, aware of Thomas pressed against her side, tension radiating from the boy. And this, Silas gestured to his companion, is Jack Crowley. He's been kind enough to offer advice on making the ranch more profitable. Crowley tipped his hat to Eleanor, his smile not reaching his eyes. Ma'am, pleasure. His gaze swept the ranch, assessing, calculating. Fine property. Be worth twice this with some modernization, better water management. We're managing fine, Cole said flatly. Are you? Crowley's tone was mild, but his meaning sharp. Lost cattle, burned barn, men quitting. I hear times are hard. Times are always hard. We survive. Surviving isn't thriving, Mr. Riker. Crowley dismounted, his movements unhurried, confident. Silas here tells me you're a fine foreman, but this ranch needs capital, needs expertise beyond cattle and horses. It needs someone who understands markets, business, the future. The future belongs to Thomas and Lily, Cole said, his voice dropping to something dangerous. Not to speculators and carpetbaggers. Crowley's smile thinned. Carpetbagger. Haven't heard that slur in a while. Tell me, Riker, you fought in the war? What if I did? Just wondering which side. Crowley's tone was conversational, but Eleanor heard the challenge underneath. Because the South lost. And the men who won't accept that are the ones bleeding themselves dry, holding on to dirt that'll never pay. The air went electric with tension. Cole's hand tightened on the rifle, and for a moment Eleanor thought he might actually lift it again. "Gentlemen?" Eleanor stepped forward, her voice cool and authoritative in a way that would have made her mother proud. Perhaps this conversation would be more productive after breakfast and coffee. "Mr. Boone, you must be exhausted from your journey. Mr. Crowley, I'm sure you'd appreciate Maria's cooking. She's quite excellent." She'd deliberately diffused the moment by appealing to comfort and civility, two things men like Crowley understood. It worked. The tension broke slightly, and Silas laughed, clapping Crowley on the shoulder. "See? The governess has more sense than all of us. Come, let's eat and discuss things rationally." Cole's eyes met Eleanor's across the porch, and in them she read both frustration and reluctant appreciation. She'd interfered in his confrontation, but she'd also prevented it from escalating into something irreversible. Inside, Maria served breakfast with the silent efficiency of someone who'd learned to read dangerous currents. Silas dominated the conversation, talking about Austin, politics, opportunities for progress. Crowley said little, but his eyes constantly moved, cataloging, assessing. The children ate in silence, and Eleanor noted how Thomas kept his body between Crowley and Lily, a protective instinct that broke her heart. "So, Miss Hayes," Silas said, turning his attention to her, "Boston, is it? What brings a refined lady to our humble ranch?" "The children, Mr. Boone. You hired me to teach them, and that's what I intend to do." Yes, of course. Though I confess I'm reconsidering the necessity." He glanced at Crowley. "If we were to sell, if the children were to move to the city, they'd have proper schools, proper society." "No." Thomas's voice cut across the table, loud and defiant. "This is our home. Pa wanted us here." "Thomas," Silas started. "He told me. Before he died, he told me this ranch would be ours, that we'd learn to run it, that it was our legacy." Thomas's voice shook with fury and grief. "You can't just sell it." "Your father said a lot of things, boy, but I'm the owner, and I'll do what's best for... What's best is keeping your word to your brother." Cole's voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of absolute certainty. "Daniel built this place from nothing. You haven't set foot here in 5 years, Silas. You don't get to show up with a vulture and tear it down." "Careful, Riker." Silas's affability cracked, showing something harder beneath. "You work for me. Don't forget that. I work for the ranch, for Daniel's children, for the promise I made to him when he was dying that I'd keep this place alive until they were old enough to decide its future themselves." How noble. And how long can you keep that promise? Another year? 6 months? Crowley leaned back, his expression calculating. "I've seen the numbers, Riker. You're drowning. Sell now, get a fair price, and everyone walks away whole. Wait too long, and you'll lose everything to debt." "We're not selling," Thomas said again, his young voice trying for the same authority as Cole's. Crowley looked at him with something that might have been pity or might have been contempt. "Kid, you're 10. You don't get a vote." Eleanor set down her fork with a deliberate clink that drew every eye. "Actually, Mr. Crowley, in matters of inheritance and guardianship, children's preferences are increasingly being considered by courts, especially when there's evidence that a sale might not be in their best interest." She met his gaze steadily. "I'm not a lawyer, but I did study law before becoming a teacher. If this goes to court, a judge will want to know whether selling serves the children or merely serves the adults' financial interests." Silence fell across the table. Crowley's expression hardened and Silas looked uncomfortable. "Are you threatening me, Miss Hayes?" Crowley's voice was soft. "I'm educating you, Mr. Crowley, since that's what I'm paid to do." She stood, collecting plates. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have lessons to prepare. Thomas, Lily, come with me, please." They obeyed instantly, clearly grateful for the escape. As Eleanor led them toward their room, she heard Silas's voice low and angry. "You said she'd be no trouble. A schoolmarm, you said, someone to keep them busy. I said I'd hire a teacher. I didn't promise she'd be docile." But Silas's voice carried uncertainty now. In the children's room, with the door closed, Thomas stared at Eleanor with something approaching awe. "You talked back to them, both of them." "I stated facts. There's a difference." Eleanor pulled out the slate and chalk she'd packed. "Now, we're going to start your lessons, because that's what we're here to do. But first, I need you to tell me everything you know about your father's will." Thomas blinked. "Why?" "Because if you want to save this ranch, we need to understand the legal ground we're standing on. And if I'm going to help you, I need information." She sat cross-legged on the floor, making herself their height, their equal. "Your father was smart. He built this place from nothing. He wouldn't have left it vulnerable. So tell me, what did he say to you before he died? What promises did he make?" Thomas's eyes filled with tears. He blinked away furiously. He said when I turned 18, the ranch would be mine. That Uncle Silas was owner in name, but Cole would teach me everything, and when I was old enough, it would transfer. He made me promise to take care of Lily, to keep the land, to— His voice broke. "He made me promise." "And you will keep that promise," Eleanor said firmly. "But first, we need to make sure the law agrees with what your father intended. Did he write this down? Was there a will?" "Lawyer in Austin has it, Mr. Pemberton. But Cole says Silas is trying to change it, trying to say Pa wasn't in his right mind when he wrote it." Eleanor's mind raced. A contested will, a manipulative uncle, a land speculator circling like a shark. And caught in the middle, two traumatized children and a foreman fighting to keep a promise to a dead friend. She'd come here to teach reading and arithmetic. She was going to end up in the middle of a range war. "All right," she said, making her decision. "Here's what we're going to do. For the next 2 hours, I'm going to teach you the law, property rights, inheritance, guardianship. It's not poetry, but it's what you need to know to fight for this place. Can you do that? Can you learn boring legal terms if it means saving your home?" Thomas nodded fiercely. Lily, silent beside him, nodded too. "Good. Let's begin." Outside, raised voices filtered through the walls, Cole and Silas arguing, Crowley's smooth interjections. Eleanor ignored them, focusing on the children, on teaching them the language of power and property that would become their armor. She'd been hired to teach, but she was beginning to understand that here, teaching meant survival. And survival meant war. 3 weeks passed like a slow burn, each day adding fuel to tensions that crackled through the ranch like heat lightning before a storm. Eleanor established her routine with the stubborn persistence of water-wearing stone. Lessons every morning, accounts work in the afternoon, and evenings spent reading aloud to the children from the books she'd brought in her trunk, the ones Cole hadn't burned yet. Thomas proved sharp as broken glass, soaking up legal terminology and property law with an intensity that went beyond mere learning. He was arming himself, Eleanor realized, preparing for a battle he understood was coming. Lily remained quieter, but her whispers grew more frequent, and sometimes Eleanor caught her smiling at the stories, her small hand reaching out to touch the pages as if the words themselves held magic. Cole remained a wall of granite, speaking to Eleanor only when necessary, his responses clipped and efficient. He watched her, though. She felt his eyes tracking her movements across the ranch yard, assessing her like he might assess a horse of uncertain temperament. Waiting, she suspected, for her to break, to pack her bags and flee like the others. She had no intention of giving him the satisfaction. The ranch hands had begun to warm to her after she'd helped Martinez write a letter to his mother in Mexico, translating his rough Spanish into elegant prose that made the hard-faced cowboy's eyes shine with unexpected tears. Word spread, and suddenly men were finding excuses to linger near the main house, asking for help with letters, with arithmetic, with problems they'd been too proud to admit they couldn't solve. Cole noticed, of course. He noticed everything. "You're making them soft," he said one evening, finding her on the porch teaching Jessie to read from a dime novel. The young ranch hand flushed and made excuses, retreating to the bunkhouse with the book tucked under his arm like contraband. Eleanor set down her own book, meeting Cole's glare with calm. "I'm teaching them skills that will serve them regardless of where they work. Reading, writing, basic mathematics. These aren't luxuries, Mr. Riker. They're tools. Tools they don't need for roping cattle or fixing fence." But his voice lacked its usual conviction, and Eleanor sensed something shifting beneath his resistance. "Perhaps not, but they might need them for negotiating wages, reading contracts, writing to family." She paused. "Jesse has been sending money home to his sister for 3 years. He just learned last week that the man handling the transfers has been skimming 20%. He couldn't read the receipts." Cole's jaw tightened. The banker in town. Mr. Hutchins. That explains why Jesse's been talking about quitting, moving back east. Cole's expression darkened with anger, but not at Eleanor, at the injustice, the predation on ignorance. Hutchins has been cheating the hands? The ones who can't read, yes. I helped Jesse draft a letter to the territorial marshal, with documentation. Eleanor allowed herself a small smile. Mr. Hutchins will find reading is suddenly very valuable indeed. For a moment, Cole just looked at her, and something in his expression cracked. Not quite approval, but acknowledgement. You fight dirty. I fight smart. There's a difference. She stood, brushing dust from her skirt. The men respect you because you're strong, because you protect them. But respect born from gratitude runs deeper than respect born from fear. When you help someone read, write, think, you give them power they'll remember you for. Pretty speech. But power makes men dangerous. Only if they're your enemies. These men are loyal to you, Mr. Riker. Making them more capable doesn't threaten you, it strengthens you. She picked up her book. Though I suspect you already know that, and you're arguing because you're stubborn, not because you're stupid. His laugh surprised them both, short, rough, like he'd forgotten the sound. You got a sharp tongue, Miss Hayes. I've been told, usually right before someone tries to fire me. Can't fire you. Silas hired you, and much as I hate to admit it, he trailed off, his gaze distant. The kids are reading at the table now. Thomas asked me yesterday what jurisdiction meant, and Lily, his voice softened fractionally. She sang, humming one of those songs you taught her, first time I've heard her sing since her father died. Eleanor's throat tightened with unexpected emotion. They're resilient. Children are, when given reason to hope. Hope's dangerous, makes people careless. So is despair, makes them reckless. She moved toward the door, then paused. Mr. Riker, why did you burn those books? Thomas mentioned it, and I confess, I don't understand. His face closed off again, walls slamming back into place. Because Daniel died surrounded by books, filling his head with ideas about progress and civilization while the land killed him anyway. Because those kids were reading about knights and castles while their father's body was cooling on the kitchen table. His voice went harsh. Books lie, Miss Hayes. They promise things they can't deliver. Better to burn them than let children build dreams on ash. He walked away before she could respond. His shoulders rigid with a pain Eleanor was beginning to understand wasn't anger at all. It was grief so deep he'd fossilized it into armor just to survive. Inside, Maria was ladling stew into bowls, her movements economical and practiced. You are getting through to him, she said without looking up. Slowly, but you are. I'm not trying to get through to him. I'm trying to teach the children. Mentirosa. Liar. But Maria's tone was affectionate. You teach the children, yes, but you also teach Cole, whether he knows it or not, whether you know it or not. Eleanor had no answer to that, so she changed the subject. Has there been any word from Mr. Pemberton, the lawyer in Austin? Maria's expression darkened. Silas received a letter yesterday. He burned it in the fireplace, but not before Cole saw the seal. Pemberton's office. Whatever it said, it made Silas angry enough to ride out this morning without explanation. And Crowley? Gone with him. But that one, Maria made the sign against evil that Eleanor had seen her use before. That one is like a snake. Even when you cannot see him, you know he is close. Eleanor's instincts agreed. Crowley had stayed at the ranch for 3 days after that first breakfast, always watching, always calculating. He tried to charm her once, cornering her in the barn with compliments about her spirit and suggestions that a woman of her intelligence might find opportunities in town, away from the difficulties of the ranch. She'd smiled sweetly and reminded him that she had a contract and a pistol. He'd laughed, but he hadn't approached her alone again. The children appeared from their room, Thomas carrying a slate covered in careful arithmetic, Lily clutching a primer. They'd become almost comfortable with Eleanor, though Thomas still tested her constantly, watching for signs she'd leave like the others. Did I do the sums right? Thomas pushed the slate toward her, his expression carefully neutral. Eleanor examined his work, long division, carried out with meticulous precision. Perfect. You're ready for percentages, I think. They'll be useful for understanding ranch finances. His eyes lit up. Can you teach me what you taught Jesse? About checking if someone's cheating? I can, though I hope you never need to use it. She handed back the slate. Why don't you practice writing a sample contract? Pretend you're hiring someone to work the ranch. What terms would you include to protect yourself? Thomas nodded eagerly and retreated to work, Lily settling beside him to sound out words from her primer. Watching them, Eleanor felt the satisfaction that had always drawn her to teaching. The moment when knowledge became power, when children realized they could shape their world instead of just enduring it. The door banged open, and Jesse burst in, his face flushed with exertion. Cole! Tracks again, but different this time. Looks like scouts, multiple riders, circling the property. Cole was already moving, checking his rifle, his movements precise and practiced. How many? Martinez counted 4 distinct sets, maybe more. They were testing the fence lines, looking for weak points. They're planning another raid. Cole's voice was flat, certain. Bigger than before. Jesse, get the men ready. We're riding perimeter tonight, full watch. Martinez takes the high ground with the scope. Carlos and Dutch cover the stock. Nobody sleeps until we know what we're facing. What about the house? Eleanor asked, her hand instinctively going to the pistol in her pocket. If they're circling, if they know the men will be spread thin, Cole's eyes cut to her, sharp and assessing. You know how to use that pistol you carry, or is it just for show? My father taught me. I'm not an expert, but I don't miss at close range. He studied her for a long moment, then made a decision that clearly cost him pride. Maria stays here with you and the kids. If anyone comes who isn't supposed to, you bar the door and shoot through the windows. Don't hesitate, don't wait to see if they're friendly. Anyone approaching the house tonight is an enemy. Understood? Eleanor nodded, her mouth dry. Understood. Thomas. Cole crouched to the boy's level, his voice softer. You remember what your pa taught you about the cellar, the hiding spot? Yes, sir. If Miss Hayes tells you to hide, you hide. No questions, no arguments. You protect your sister, and you don't come out until you hear me or Maria call for you specifically. Not just any voice, mine or Maria's. Can you do that? Thomas's face was pale but determined. I can. Cole's hand briefly touched the boy's shoulder, a rare gesture of affection from a man who wore isolation like a second skin. Then he was gone, calling orders, organizing defenses with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before, who'd fought wars where hesitation meant death. The afternoon descended into controlled chaos. Men checked weapons, loaded supplies, positioned themselves at strategic points around the property. Eleanor helped Maria secure the house, windows latched, doors barred, lamps extinguished so firelight wouldn't silhouette them as targets. The children were quieter than usual, fear making them small and still. Eleanor kept them busy with lessons, maintaining normalcy as armor against terror. They practiced reading, worked arithmetic problems, played quiet word games that kept their minds occupied even as their ears strained for sounds of danger. Darkness fell like a hammer, sudden and absolute. The prairie night swallowed the ranch, turning familiar spaces alien and threatening. Eleanor sat by the window with her pistol, watching shapes move in the moonlight, ranch hands on patrol, horses shifting in corrals, and beyond the fence line, nothing. Just darkness and the wind carrying sounds that might be men or might be imagination. Tell us a story, Lily whispered from where she huddled with Thomas on the floor, wrapped in blankets despite the heat. Please. Eleanor tore her eyes from the window, forcing her voice steady. What kind of story? A brave one, where someone scared becomes brave. Eleanor thought of Boston, of her own father's stories. All right. Once there was a merchant's daughter who lived in a city by the sea. She was afraid of many things, dark water, storms, the violence that men could do. When her mother died, her father grieved so deeply he stopped seeing dangers around them. Bad men came, demanding money he didn't have, threatening harm if he didn't pay. Thomas had straightened, listening now. What did she do? She learned. She watched how the bad men operated, when they came, how they threatened. And she realized they were cowards who preyed on fear. So she stopped being afraid. Or rather, she became more afraid of letting them hurt her father than she was of what they might do to her. Eleanor kept her voice soft, her eyes returning to the window. One night when they came, she was ready. She'd hired boys from the docks, poor lads who'd fight for coin, and when the men tried to force their way in, they found a house full of fighters instead of victims. Did anyone die? Thomas's voice was tight. No. The bad men ran, and they never came back because they'd learned the merchant's daughter was more dangerous than they were. Eleanor met his eyes in the darkness. Fear doesn't make you weak, Thomas. What you do with fear makes you weak or strong. Your father knew that. Cole knows it too. Are you scared now? Lily asked. Yes, Eleanor said honestly. But I'm also angry. And anger is useful. It makes you sharp, focused. It's fear without the paralysis. A shot cracked through the night, distant but clear. Eleanor's hand tightened on her pistol, and Maria appeared from the kitchen with her own rifle, an old weapon, worn smooth from use. Northwest pasture, Maria said. Martinez's warning shot. They waited, seconds stretching into small eternities. Then more shots, a rapid exchange that spoke of real combat, not warnings. Shouts echoed across the prairie, men yelling in English and Spanish, horses screaming. The cellar, Eleanor said, keeping her voice level. Now. Thomas grabbed Lily's hand and Maria led them to the trapdoor. As Thomas descended, he looked back at Eleanor. You're staying up here? Someone has to watch the house. But you said the merchant's daughter had help. She didn't fight alone. Eleanor smiled despite her fear. No, she didn't. She touched his face briefly. But she also knew when to let the fighters fight. Be brave, Thomas. Be smart. Keep your sister safe. He disappeared into the darkness below, and Maria secured the trapdoor, covering it with the rug. Then they took positions, Eleanor at the front window, Maria at the back door, and waited. The gunfire intensified, close now, and Eleanor could see muzzle flashes against the darkness, brief stars of violence. Men ran past the house toward the corrals, and she caught glimpses of faces she didn't recognize, hard men, dirty, with the look of wolves hunting in a pack, rustlers. And they'd come in force. A figure detached from the darkness, moving toward the house with purpose. Eleanor raised her pistol, sighting down the barrel with trembling hands, waiting to see if he'd pass by or... He grabbed the door handle, yanking hard. The bar held, and he cursed, kicking at the wood. Eleanor's finger tightened on the trigger, her father's lessons flooding back. Breathe. Aim center mass. Don't jerk the trigger. Squeeze slowly, like you're holding something precious. The door shuddered under another kick. Through the window, she could see his face, scarred, twisted with fury, and something worse, anticipation. He wasn't here for horses or cattle. He was here for something else, something darker. Eleanor fired. The recoil jolted her arm, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. The man screamed and fell backward, clutching his shoulder. Not a killing shot, but enough. He scrambled away into darkness, leaving blood on the porch. Bien hecho. Maria's voice was fierce with approval. You do not miss. Eleanor's hands shook violently now, the pistol suddenly heavy as iron. She'd shot a man. She'd actually pulled the trigger and watched him fall. The reality of it crashed over her like ice water. The sound, the blood, the knowledge that she'd crossed a line she could never uncross. But beneath the horror was something else. Relief, satisfaction, the cold certainty that she'd protected the children, that she'd do it again without hesitation. More shapes in the darkness, and Maria's rifle cracked, a deep boom that rattled the windows. Someone yelled in pain, and the figures retreated. For a moment, silence reclaimed the night, broken only by distant shouting and the crackle of a fire that shouldn't exist. The barn, Maria said grimly. They lit it again. Through the window, Eleanor could see flames climbing into the sky, orange and terrible. Not the hay barn this time. That was already gone. This was the stable, where the horses were kept overnight, where animals trapped behind wooden walls would burn alive if someone didn't reach them. The door to the bunkhouse burst open, and Cole charged out with two other men, sprinting toward the burning stable. Even from a distance, Eleanor could see the calculation in his movements, assessing which walls might still be breached, where the animals could be driven out, how much time existed before the structure collapsed. Shots rang out, aimed at Cole and his men from the darkness beyond the corrals. They dove for cover, pinned down, while inside the stable horses screamed with a sound Eleanor would hear in nightmares forever. "He cannot reach them," Maria said, her voice breaking. "They will die, and he will blame himself. He always blames himself." Eleanor looked at the pistol in her hand, then at the burning stable, then at the trapdoor hiding two children who'd already lost everything once. She thought of her father's lessons, of the merchant's daughter who'd learned that survival meant choosing when to be afraid and when to be angry. She made her choice. "Watch the cellar," Eleanor said, moving toward the door. "If I'm not back in 10 minutes, bar everything and don't open for anyone but Cole." "Estás loca. You're crazy. You cannot—" But Eleanor was already unbarring the door, slipping into the night before Maria could stop her. The heat from the fire washed over her like judgment, and smoke stung her eyes, but she ran toward the sound of trapped animals and desperate men. Her pistol raised and her terror shoved down into some dark place where it couldn't slow her. Cole saw her coming, his face a mask of soot and fury. "What the hell are you doing? Get back to the house." "The stable door is chained from the outside. I saw it when I passed earlier today. You can't break through the front, but I can reach the back while you draw their fire." Eleanor didn't wait for permission, circling wide around the building while bullets kicked up dust where she'd been standing. The heat was tremendous, suffocating, and Eleanor's lungs burned with each breath. She found the chain securing the back entrance, thick and heavy, locked with a padlock she had no hope of breaking. But the posts holding it, those were old wood, dry as tinder, weakened by years of weather and now by flames. She braced herself and fired at the post once, twice, 3 times. The wood splintered, cracked, gave way with a groan. Eleanor yanked the chain free, hauled the door open, and immediately regretted every decision that had led her here. A wall of smoke and heat blasted out, along with the frantic shapes of horses half mad with terror. They charged past her, nearly trampling her in their panic, a flood of muscle and desperation seeking open air and salvation. Eleanor pressed herself against the stable wall, counting 12 horses, 14, 16. A beam collapsed inside with a sound like bones breaking, and flames erupted through the gap. The last few horses were still inside, trapped behind falling debris, their screams cutting through the roar of fire. Strong hands grabbed Eleanor's arm, yanking her back. Cole's face appeared through the smoke, his expression beyond fury into something like awe and terror combined. "Move! It's coming down!" They ran as the stable roof collapsed inward with a sound like the world ending. The force of it knocked them both to the ground, heat washing over them in a wave that felt like judgment. Cole covered Eleanor's body with his own, shielding her from falling debris and embers that rained from the sky like hellfire. When it was over, when the roar diminished to crackling and hissing, they lay in the dust, breathing hard, alive against impossible odds. Cole rolled off her, staring at her with an expression she couldn't read. "You stupid, reckless, insane woman. What the hell were you thinking? That horses were dying, that you couldn't reach them, that someone had to do something." Eleanor pushed herself upright, checking for injuries and finding only bruises and burns that would hurt tomorrow. "Did we get them all?" "Lost 3 in the collapse, saved 13. His voice was hoarse from smoke. Because you ran into a burning building with a pistol and shot your way through a chain." "Actually, I shot through the post. The chain was too strong." She coughed, tasting ash. "Where are the rustlers?" "Gone. Ran when they realized we weren't giving up, when Martinez shot 2 of them off their horses." Cole stood, pulling Eleanor upright with hands that shook slightly. "They got maybe 5 head of cattle, lost twice that in men. 2 dead, 3 wounded. Badly enough, they'll probably not survive the ride wherever they're going." Around them, ranch hands were emerging from defensive positions, checking each other for injuries, dousing spot fires before they could spread. Jesse limped up, his leg bleeding but his face alive with adrenaline and victory. "We held them, Cole. They came hard, and we held." "You held." Cole's voice carried weight, respect. "All of you. This ranch stands because you stood." His eyes found Eleanor again. "Because people I didn't expect to fight decided to fight anyway." Which Martinez appeared, reporting in rapid Spanish that Eleanor's lessons had helped her understand. The perimeter was secure. No more raiders detected. The animals were safe except for the 3 lost to fire. Maria emerged from the house, relief washing over her face when she saw Eleanor alive. And then Thomas and Lily climbed from the cellar, their faces streaked with tear tracks, but their eyes bright with desperate hope. "Miss Hayes!" Thomas ran to her and Eleanor caught him, holding tight while he shook against her. "We heard shooting, heard you leave, thought you'd—" "I'm fine. Everyone's fine." She looked at Cole over the boy's head. "Well, mostly fine." Cole's expression had softened imperceptibly, the hard edges blurred by exhaustion and something Eleanor suspected he'd fight admitting. Gratitude, maybe, or the beginning of trust. "Get her inside, Maria. Treat any burns. Jesse, organize cleanup and watch rotation. I want eyes on all approaches until dawn. Martinez, send someone to town for the marshal. Those bodies we've got, we need documented." As Maria led Eleanor toward the house, Cole called after her. "Miss Hayes?" She turned. He stood silhouetted against the dying fire, a figure carved from shadow and flame, dangerous and damaged, and something more she was only beginning to understand. "You've got more steel in you than most men I've known. Daniel would have—" He stopped, the words caught somewhere between pride and grief. "Thank you. For the horses. For everything." It wasn't an apology for how he'd treated her. It wasn't acceptance. But it was acknowledgement, and from Cole Riker, that was more valuable than gold. Inside, Maria treated Eleanor's minor burns with a salve that stung like judgment, while the children hovered close, unwilling to let her out of sight. The ranch slowly settled into exhausted peace, men bedding down in shifts, the rescued horses calming in the corrals. "You are trembling," Maria observed, wrapping Eleanor's hands in clean cloth. "The fear catches up, see? Always after. Never during." "I shot a man." Eleanor's voice was barely a whisper. "I looked him in the face and pulled the trigger." "And if you had not?" Eleanor thought of the door breaking, of what men like that did when they found women and children unprotected. "He would have hurt us." "Hurt the children." "Then you did what you must. That is survival, Nina. Not pretty, not civilized, but necessary." Maria's weathered hands were gentle. "You think Cole became hard for no reason? This land, these men, they teach you that mercy is luxury, but you—" She smiled slightly. "You have mercy and steel both. That is rare." The door opened, and Cole entered, moving with the careful stiffness of someone nursing injuries he wouldn't admit to. He poured water, drank deeply, then sat across from Eleanor with the heavy silence of a man wrestling with words. "You asked me once why I burned Daniel's books," he said finally. "I'm going to tell you, and then we're not speaking of it again. Understood?" Eleanor nodded. "Daniel and I fought together in the war. Different units, but we crossed paths. Became friends in the way men do when death's a constant companion. After it ended, we both came west. Him to build something, me to forget everything." His voice was flat, reciting facts to keep emotion at bay. "He married Anna, had Thomas, built this ranch from sand and will. I worked for him, learned from him, became his foreman because he saw something in me I couldn't see in myself." He paused, jaw working. "When Anna died birthing Lily, it broke something in Daniel. He threw himself into books, into ideas, into building a legacy through knowledge because he couldn't bear the grief. He taught Thomas to read before the boy could walk properly, filled the house with books about law, science, history, said his children would have more than he did, that they'd rise above survival into something better." Cole's hands tightened into fists. Then that thunderstorm hit. Daniel was checking fence because he'd read about proper livestock management, about modern ranching techniques. He was out there because he believed in progress, in knowledge, in the future those books promised. His voice cracked. And lightning killed him like he was nothing. All that knowledge, all those dreams, didn't matter. The land killed him anyway. Eleanor understood now, the grief fossilized into rage. "So you burned the books because they reminded you of him, because they represented everything that couldn't save him." "I burned them because I was angry, because watching Thomas and Lily read his books, sitting in his chair, learning the things he wanted to teach them, it was like watching ghosts, and I couldn't—" He stopped, his control fraying. "I couldn't protect him. My job was keeping people alive, and I failed." "It wasn't your job. It was a storm, Cole. Nature, fate, whatever you want to call it, but it wasn't your failure." "Felt like it." He looked at her then, really looked, his eyes holding a pain so deep it had grown roots. And then Silas hires you, another teacher with books and ideas and promises about bettering these kids. I thought you'd be just another person filling their heads with dreams that'll get them killed. Another person I'd have to watch leave when reality broke those dreams. But, Eleanor prompted gently, but you ran into a burning building tonight. You shot a rustler without hesitation. You're teaching those kids not just reading, but how to think, how to fight with law and words instead of just fists. He shook his head, something almost like a smile ghosting across his face. You're not like the others. You got teeth, Miss Hayes, and this place needs teeth. It was the closest to approval Eleanor had heard from him, and despite everything, the exhaustion, the fear, the ache settling into her bones, she felt something warm unfold in her chest. The children need more than teeth, though, she said carefully. They need hope, purpose, the belief that their father's dreams weren't foolish, that knowledge and strength can coexist. Maybe, Cole stood, moving to the window to look out at the darkness. Or maybe hope is just another way to hurt yourself. But tonight you proved something. You can hope and still fight. Maybe that's what Daniel was trying to teach me all along, and I was too stubborn to learn. He left without another word, returning to the men, to the work that never ended. Eleanor sat in the quiet kitchen, feeling the weight of the night pressing down like stones, hearing Lily's soft breathing as she slept against Thomas's shoulder. Maria brought coffee, strong and bitter. He is changing. Slowly, but he is changing. You see this, see? I see a man in pain who's forgotten how to be anything but hard. Eleanor wrapped her hands around the cup, seeking warmth. But yes, I see the change. Whether it's enough for what? Eleanor thought of the contested will of Silas and Crowley circling like vultures, of a ranch bleeding money and facing threats from all sides. Enough to save this place. Enough to keep those children safe. Enough to make Daniel's dreams mean something. Then we fight, Maria said simply. We teach, we build, we hold the line. Because that is what women do when men are too busy being hard. We become steel they never see coming. Eleanor smiled despite her exhaustion. Steel they never see coming. I like that. In the morning, the ranch woke to scorched earth and hard truths. The stable was a skeleton of charred beams, 3 horses dead, property damage that would cost money they didn't have to replace. But they'd held. They'd beaten back the rustlers, protected the stock, survived another night in a land that specialized in taking survival away. Cole assembled the men at dawn, his face grim, but his voice carrying pride. You fought like devils. Every man here proved last night that this ranch stands because you choose to make it stand. I won't forget that. Neither will Thomas and Lily when they're old enough to understand what you did for them. The men straightened with that, with being seen, with having their fight matter. Eleanor watched from the porch, noting how Cole commanded not through fear, but through respect earned in blood and sweat. When the meeting broke, Cole approached her, his expression carefully neutral. Silas will be back today or tomorrow. When he sees the damage, he'll use it as ammunition to push for selling. Crowley will be with him, making offers, talking about cutting losses. And you want me to? I want you to keep teaching those kids law, property rights, guardianship, inheritance, whatever will help them when this goes to court. His jaw tightened. Because it's going to court, Miss Hayes. Silas received that letter from the lawyer, and I'm guessing it wasn't good news for him. He's going to fight for control, and we need to be ready. Eleanor nodded slowly. I'll teach them. But Cole, we need more than legal knowledge. We need the actual will, documentation of your guardianship, proof of Daniel's intentions. Will's in Austin with Pemberton. Locked in his office, part of the estate proceedings. Then someone needs to go to Austin and ensure it stays safe. Ensure it isn't tampered with or mysteriously lost. Eleanor met his eyes. Someone Pemberton will talk to. Someone who can make him understand what's at stake. Cole understood immediately. You're volunteering? I'm the teacher, the educated, respectable woman from Boston. Lawyers talk to women like me. They listen when we speak their language. Eleanor straightened her spine. Give me 2 days in Austin, and I'll come back with either the will or enough information to know how to fight for it. Austin's 3 days hard ride. You'd be gone a week, maybe more. The children will manage. You'll be here. Maria will be here. And frankly, Mr. Riker, I suspect you'll appreciate the break from my sharp tongue." His mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "When would you leave?" "Tomorrow, if you can spare a man to escort me." She paused. "Or I can go alone. I've traveled alone before. Not through territory where rustlers just hit us. Not where Crowley might have men watching for exactly this kind of move." Cole shook his head. "Jesse will go with you. He's young but smart, good with a gun, and you've taught him enough he won't embarrass himself in the city. Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. Austin's dangerous in its own way. Politicians, lawyers, men who'll smile while robbing you blind. You'll be walking into enemy territory without backup." Eleanor thought of Boston, of navigating her father's world of commerce and deception, of learning young that appearances deceived and words killed as surely as bullets. "I grew up in enemy territory, Cole. I'll manage." He studied her for a long moment, and Eleanor had the sense he was recalibrating, adjusting his understanding of who she was and what she was capable of. "You're not what I expected. Neither are you. What did you expect? A tyrant, a brute who ruled through fear and violence." She smiled slightly. "But you're not that, are you? You're just a man trying to keep a promise to someone you couldn't save. That makes you desperate, not evil." Cole looked away, jaw tight with emotion he wouldn't show. Desperate men do terrible things. So do desperate women. The difference is we're usually better at hiding it behind politeness. Eleanor started toward the house, then stopped. "Cole? Last night when you covered me during the collapse, thank you. You could have let me take my chances. You didn't have to protect me." "Yeah, I did." His voice was rough. "You ran into fire for my horses, for animals that weren't even yours. That kind of courage, yeah, Daniel would have said it deserves protection." And what would Cole Riker say? He met her eyes, and for just a moment the armor dropped completely, letting her see the man underneath, scarred, tired, but still fighting. Cole Riker would say, "Don't make him regret teaching you to shoot straight. And maybe don't die in Austin. Turns out the kids need you." "Just the kids?" The corner of his mouth lifted fractionally. "Don't push your luck, Miss Hayes." He walked away, back to the work that never ended, leaving Eleanor standing in the morning light feeling something she hadn't expected to feel in this brutal, beautiful place. Hope. Dangerous, fragile, and terrifyingly real. She went inside to prepare for war. The road to Austin stretched like a promise and a threat. 3 days of hard riding through territory that grew more civilized with each mile, but no less dangerous for it. Eleanor rode beside Jesse, her body aching from hours in the saddle, but her mind sharp, cataloging everything. The way the land shifted from brutal prairie to rolling hills, the towns they passed through where suspicious eyes tracked their progress, the riders in the distance who might be travelers or might be something worse. Jesse proved better company than she'd expected. At 22, he possessed the easy confidence of youth, not yet broken by tragedy, though his eyes carried shadows that spoke of harder lessons learned. He'd fought in the war's final year, survived typhoid in a prison camp, and come west looking for the kind of freedom that only existed in distance from memory. "Cole told me to keep you safe," he said on the second day, as they watered the horses at a creek that ran cold and clear. "But I'm thinking maybe he got it backwards. You might be the one keeping me safe." Eleanor smiled, checking the pistol she'd learned to wear openly once they'd left the ranch. "I shot one man through a door, Jesse. That hardly makes me dangerous. You shot him because he was trying to break in and hurt kids. That's the right kind of dangerous." He squinted at the horizon, where dust rose in a thin line. "Riders coming. 3, maybe 4. Could be nothing. Or could be Crowley's men." Eleanor's hand moved to her pistol automatically. "How far to the next town?" "Another 6 miles. We could make it before dark if we push." The riders drew closer, resolving into 3 men on tired horses, their clothes dusty but respectable. Cowboys, probably, looking for work or heading home. They tipped their hats as they passed, their eyes lingering on Eleanor with curiosity but not threat. When they were gone, Eleanor released a breath she hadn't known she was holding. "I'm jumping at shadows." "Shadows kill you out here quick as bullets." Jesse mounted again, offering his hand to help Eleanor up. Cole's got good reason to be paranoid. Crowley's the type to buy men cheap and use them hard. If he knows you're heading to Austin, knows you might mess with his plans, then we'd best get there before he can stop us. They reached Austin as the sun painted the sky in shades of fire, the city rising from the Texas landscape like a mirage of civilization. It was bigger than Eleanor expected, more established. Buildings of stone and brick instead of weathered wood, streets that were actually streets instead of dirt tracks. People moving with the purposeful energy of commerce and politics. Jesse found them rooms at a boarding house run by a widow named Mrs. Patterson, who looked at Eleanor's travel-stained dress and exhausted face with the knowing sympathy of a woman who'd been young and desperate once. "You look like you rode through hell, honey. Room's $2 for the week, meals included. Bath's extra, but I'm thinking you need it more than you need the 50 cents. Eleanor paid gratefully, and the hot water that followed felt like salvation. She scrubbed away days of dust and sweat, watching Texas spiral down the drain, emerging pink-skinned and clean with her mind already planning the next move. Pemberton's office was on Congress Avenue, Jesse had learned from asking around. The lawyer kept regular hours, saw clients by appointment, and had a reputation for being honest in a city where honesty was frequently negotiable. Eleanor dressed carefully the next morning in her best remaining dress, dark blue, high-necked, respectable. She pinned her hair severely back and added the cameo brooch, armor of respectability. In the mirror, she looked like what she needed to be, a proper Boston lady with education, breeding, and the absolute certainty that lawyers would listen when she spoke. Pemberton's office occupied the second floor of a brick building that smelled of paper and tobacco. A clerk looked up as Eleanor entered, his expression shifting from bored to attentive when he took in her appearance. "May I help you, ma'am?" "I'm here to see Mr. Pemberton regarding the Boone estate. My name is Eleanor Hayes. I'm the governess employed by the family." "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but I've traveled 3 days from the ranch, and I suspect Mr. Pemberton would prefer to speak with me before Silas Boone learns I'm in Austin." She let steel enter her voice. "Unless you'd prefer to explain to him later why you turned away someone with information about potential fraud?" The clerk's eyes widened. "One moment, please." He disappeared through a door, and Eleanor waited, her heart hammering, but her face calm. Through the window, she could see Jesse across the street, lounging against a post but watching the building's entrance with the alertness of a sentry. The clerk returned. "Mr. Pemberton will see you now." The office was exactly what Eleanor expected. Shelves of law books, a massive desk covered in papers, and behind it a man in his 50s with silver hair and eyes that had seen every kind of human deception. He stood as she entered, his manners impeccable but his expression wary. "Miss Hayes, I confess I'm surprised to see anyone from the Boone Ranch here. Silas assured me all parties were satisfied with the estate proceedings." "Did he?" Eleanor sat without being invited, a calculated rudeness that established she wasn't intimidated. "That's fascinating, Mr. Pemberton, because the children Daniel Boone left behind are very much unsatisfied, as is their guardian, Cole Riker." Pemberton's expression shifted fractionally. "Mr. Riker is not the legal guardian. Silas Boone is." "Is he? Because Daniel Boone's will names Cole Riker as guardian until Thomas reaches his majority. I've seen the letter Daniel wrote before he died, witnessed by 3 ranch hands and sealed by the town clerk. It clearly states his intentions. A letter is not a legal document, Miss Hayes, but a will is, and I'm here to ensure that will is protected, that it reflects Daniel Boone's true wishes, and that Silas Boone doesn't manipulate probate proceedings to serve his own financial interests." Eleanor leaned forward. "I'm also here to inform you that Silas has been in contact with a land speculator named Jack Crowley, and they've been discussing selling the ranch despite the fact that such a sale would violate the terms of Daniel's estate plan." Pemberton's face had gone carefully blank, the expression of a lawyer who'd just heard something both troubling and valuable. "Those are serious accusations." "They're facts. I have documentation." Eleanor pulled papers from her bag. Copies of ranch accounts showing Silas's inflated supply costs, letters between Silas and Crowley that Thomas had found hidden in his uncle's room, witness statements from ranch hands. She'd spent her last night at the ranch gathering evidence with Maria's help, building a case like her father had taught her. "I'm not here to threaten you, Mr. Pemberton. I'm here to ensure you have all the information before you certify any estate decisions. He took the papers, reading with the careful attention of someone who understood documents were weapons. Minutes passed in silence, broken only by the rustle of pages and the distant sounds of Austin conducting business outside. Finally, Pemberton set down the papers and looked at Eleanor with something approaching respect. "You're not what I expected from a ranch governess." "I'm not what anyone expects, Mr. Pemberton. That's generally to my advantage." She met his gaze steadily. "Daniel Boone built that ranch for his children. He wanted them raised there, educated there, prepared to run it when they came of age. Silas wants to sell it, pocket the money, and leave Thomas and Lily with nothing. Cole Riker is trying to honor Daniel's wishes, despite having no legal standing and facing opposition from every direction. And you? I'm trying to teach two traumatized children that the world isn't only brutality and loss, that their father's dreams weren't foolish, that knowledge and law can protect them better than guns." Eleanor's voice hardened. "But I can't do that if Silas sells their home out from under them before they're old enough to fight back." Pemberton tapped his fingers on the desk, thinking. "The will is clear. Daniel left ownership to Silas, but with stipulations. The ranch cannot be sold until Thomas reaches 18 unless both children and their guardian agree. Profits must be held in trust for the children's education and welfare. Silas has been trying to have the guardianship clause overturned, claiming Cole Riker is unfit. On what grounds? Lack of education, violent tendencies, unsuitability for raising children in civilized manner." Pemberton's tone suggested his opinion of these arguments. Silas presented testimony from the previous governesses about conditions at the ranch, about Cole's harsh discipline, about the children being half wild. Eleanor felt fury rise like heat. The previous governesses left because they couldn't handle frontier life, not because Cole was unfit. And the children aren't wild, they're grieving. There's a difference. I agree, but Silas has lawyers in Dallas preparing arguments, and frankly, Miss Hayes, Cole Riker has no representation. If this goes to court, Silas will win by default. Then we get Cole representation. We build a counter case. We bring witnesses who will testify to his character and capability. Eleanor's mind raced. "You said you have a reputation for honesty, Mr. Pemberton. Are you Daniel Boone's lawyer or Silas Boone's?" "I was Daniel's lawyer. I drew up his will, helped him plan his estate. I liked him." Pemberton's expression grew troubled. "But Silas controls the fees now. If I oppose him too openly, I lose the account, and I have a practice to maintain. What if I could guarantee payment? What if the ranch hands pooled resources? What if we found alternative funding?" Eleanor leaned forward. "Daniel Boone trusted you. His children deserve your loyalty more than his brother does." Pretty words, but loyalty doesn't pay rent. "No, but integrity lets you sleep at night." She softened her tone. "Mr. Pemberton, I'm not asking you to work for free. I'm asking you to give me time to find a way to pay you properly. Hold off on certifying any decisions for 30 days. That's all I need." He studied her for a long moment. "You're asking me to bet my practice on a governess's promise and a dead man's children. I'm asking you to bet on what's right. And if that's not enough, I'm asking you to bet on the fact that Cole Riker and I are going to fight this with everything we have, and we'd prefer you as an ally rather than an opponent." Pemberton laughed, short, surprised, genuine. "Are you threatening me, Miss Hayes?" "I'm informing you, Mr. Pemberton. There's a difference." She stood. 30 days, please, for Daniel, if not for us." He didn't answer immediately, but something in his expression had shifted. "I'll hold the certification for 3 weeks. After that, I have legal obligations I can't ignore. If you're going to mount a defense, you'll need to move fast." "Thank you." Eleanor offered her hand and he shook it, his grip firm. "One more thing," he said as she turned to leave. "Crowley's in Austin. Saw him at the Capitol yesterday, talking with legislators about changing property laws to make forced sales easier in cases of financial hardship. If he gets those laws passed, Daniel's will won't matter. Silas could claim the ranch is failing, force a sale, and the courts would back him." Eleanor's blood went cold. "How long before those laws might pass?" "Weeks, maybe a month. These things move slow until suddenly they move fast." Pemberton's eyes were serious. "You're fighting multiple battles, Miss Hayes. The will, the guardianship, and now potential legislative changes that could undermine everything. That's a lot for a governess and a foreman to handle. Then it's good we're both stubborn. Eleanor moved to the door. If you hear anything else, anything that might help, send word to the Boone Ranch. Jesse can ride back if needed. Be careful, Miss Hayes. Men like Crowley don't like being opposed, especially by women. And Silas, for all his softness, is Daniel's brother. He knows how to hurt the people Daniel loved. Eleanor left the office with her mind churning. 3 weeks. Legislative changes, multiple fronts in a war she was only beginning to understand. She found Jesse waiting, his posture relaxed, but his eyes sharp. How'd it go? We have 3 weeks to build a case, find funding for a lawyer, and possibly stop legislative changes that would make everything we're fighting for meaningless. She started walking, needing movement to think. So about as well as expected. Jesse fell into step beside her. What's the play? We need allies. People with influence in Austin who might care about protecting orphans' rights or opposing predatory land grabs. Eleanor's mind cataloged possibilities. Newspapers, maybe? Politicians who ran on protecting families? Churches? Civic groups? Anyone who... She stopped mid-sentence, her attention caught by a familiar figure across the street. Crowley stood outside a saloon talking with 2 men who had the hard look of hired muscle. As Eleanor watched, he gestured toward Pemberton's building, his expression calculating. He knows I'm here, Eleanor said quietly. Might just be coincidence. Or Silas wired ahead. Or Crowley has people watching Pemberton's office. She pulled Jesse into the doorway of a shop, out of direct sight. We need to leave Austin today. If he knows we're here, he'll try to stop us from getting back to the ranch. Or he'll follow us and learn what we discovered. Jesse's hand moved to his gun. Could be we're safer staying, losing ourselves in the city until we're ready to move. Eleanor weighed options, thinking like her father had taught her, not just the immediate move, but 3 moves ahead. If we stay, we risk him cornering us where Cole can't help. If we leave now, we risk ambush on the road. But if we leave tomorrow morning publicly, making it clear we're going, he'll assume we didn't learn anything important. Or that we're running scared. Jesse's eyes lit with understanding. And he might not bother following immediately. Exactly. Tonight we stay visible, eat at the boarding house, be seen acting like defeated tourists. Tomorrow we leave, obviously, maybe even make a show of arguing about giving up on the ranch. Eleanor's mind raced. But we send the documents to Cole by courier, separate route. Even if we're stopped, the information gets through. You think like a criminal, Miss Hayes? I think like someone who grew up around men who operated just inside the law's edge. My father always said the best defense is making your opponent underestimate you. She watched Crowley disappear into the saloon. Let's find a courier service, then get dinner. Tomorrow we play defeated. The courier was a grizzled rider named Red, who charged $5 to guarantee delivery and swore on his mother's grave the package would reach Cole within 4 days. Eleanor paid from her dwindling funds and felt the weight of responsibility settle heavier. Everything depended on those documents reaching the ranch safely. That night at the boarding house, Eleanor and Jesse staged their performance over Mrs. Patterson's pot roast and cornbread. They spoke loud enough to be overheard, complaining about the trip's futility, about lawyers who wouldn't help, about maybe looking for work in Austin instead of returning to a failing ranch. Mrs. Patterson played along without being asked, clucking sympathetically and offering advice about city positions for a lady of Eleanor's refinement. It was theater, and Eleanor felt the weight of watching eyes from other tables, strangers who might report back to Crowley, or might be his men directly. In her room later, Eleanor packed her bag and checked her pistol, the familiar ritual calming her racing thoughts. Through the thin walls, she heard Jesse moving in the adjacent room, the scrape of a chair as he positioned it to block the door. Sleep came fitfully, broken by dreams of burning barns and children's screams, of Cole's face disappearing into smoke and Thomas's voice asking why all the teachers left. She woke before dawn with her heart hammering, the gray light through the window making shadows into threats. Jesse was already waiting in the dining room, eating quickly with the focus of someone preparing for hard travel. They left as the sun rose, making sure to be seen, to wave goodbye to Mrs. Patterson, to ride out at an easy pace like people with nothing to hide and nowhere urgent to be. The first day passed without incident. They made good time, stopping only to water the horses and eat the jerky and hardtack they'd packed. Eleanor kept watching their back trail, but if anyone followed, they were professional enough to stay invisible. The second day brought trouble. They just forded a shallow creek when Jesse tensed, his hand moving to his rifle. Riders. 4, coming fast from the northeast. Eleanor's heart kicked into overdrive, but she kept her voice level. How far? Mile, maybe less, moving like they've got purpose. He scanned the landscape, open prairie with scattered mesquite, a rocky outcrop about a quarter-mile south. We could make those rocks fort up, but if they're not hostile, we'd look foolish. And if they are hostile, we'd be trapped. Eleanor thought fast. We keep riding, stay ready. If they approach friendly, we respond friendly. If not, you ride like hell, and I'll slow them down. Jesse. Not arguing, Miss Hayes. Cole told me to keep you safe. That's what I'm doing. His young face was set with determination that reminded Eleanor painfully of Thomas. You're more important to those kids than I am. You get back, you fight for them. That matters more than one cowboy. Eleanor wanted to argue, but the riders were close enough now to see clearly. 4 men, heavily armed, riding with the coordinated precision of soldiers or outlaws. Not travelers. Hunters. Ride! Jesse barked, and Eleanor kicked her horse into a gallop without hesitation. Behind her, she heard Jesse's rifle crack once, twice, then the answering thunder of return fire that made her blood freeze. She rode hard, low over her horse's neck, the wind screaming in her ears and her heart screaming louder. More gunfire, then a young man's cry of pain that she heard even over the pounding hooves. But she didn't stop, didn't look back, because stopping meant Jesse's sacrifice was meaningless, and those children needed her alive more than they needed her brave. The landscape blurred into impressions, rock, sky, the endless Texas prairie that stretched like judgment. Her horse was blowing hard when she finally risked a glance backward and saw nothing. No pursuit, just empty land and the knowledge that Jesse might be dying or dead because he'd protected her. She rode until the horse couldn't run anymore, until her own lungs burned and her hands bled from gripping the reins. Then she found cover in a dry wash and waited, pistol drawn, listening for sounds of pursuit that never came. Hours passed. The sun climbed and fell. Eleanor's water ran out. Her horse trembled with exhaustion, and still she waited because returning meant risking capture, and going forward meant abandoning Jesse to whatever fate had found him. As dusk painted the sky, she made her decision. The ranch was 2 days ahead, the ambush site 4 hours behind. Jesse had bought her escape with his blood, possibly his life. The least she could do was honor that sacrifice by getting the information to Cole, by continuing the fight. She rode through the night, navigating by stars her father had taught her to read, pushing the horse as gently as she could while still making time. At dawn, she reached a small settlement, 3 buildings and a well, and bought water and food with her last coins, catching a few hours of sleep in the shadow of the trading post while her horse recovered. The proprietor, an old man with one eye and knowledge written in scars, looked at her blood-crusted hands and exhausted face without comment. You running from trouble or toward it? Both. He nodded as if that made perfect sense. Road ahead's clear as of yesterday. Past that, can't say. You got the look of someone who's made enemies. I have a talent for it. Useful talent, if you survive it. He handed her a canteen freshly filled. No charge. Woman alone out here's either brave or desperate, and both deserve help. Eleanor rode on through the second day and into country that grew familiar, the markers she recognized from the trip out telling her she was close. She reached the ranch boundaries as night fell, her horse stumbling with exhaustion, her own body beyond pain into numbness. The main house glowed with lamplight, and as she approached, a figure emerged from the shadows with rifle raised. Identify yourself. It's Eleanor. Eleanor Hayes. I'm back. Martinez appeared, his face shocked with relief. Madre de Dios, we thought Cole thought you were taken or killed. Jesse didn't come back. No word, nothing. Jesse's gone. Ambushed on the road back, 4 men. He held them off so I could escape. Eleanor slid from the saddle and nearly collapsed, Martinez catching her before she hit the ground. I have to see Cole. Now. It's urgent. He's inside with... Martinez stopped as the door burst open and Cole charged out, his face a mask of barely controlled fury and relief. Where the hell have you been? He grabbed Eleanor's shoulders, his hands too tight, his eyes wild. 4 days overdue, no word, Jesse missing. We thought Crowley had killed you both. Jesse saved my life. 4 riders ambushed us a day and a half out. He held them back while I ran. Eleanor's voice cracked. He might be dead because of me, because I went to Austin and Crowley found out. Stop. Cole's hands gentled fractionally. Jesse knew the risks. So did I when I sent him. This isn't your fault. He searched her face, and Eleanor saw the fear beneath the anger, the terror that he'd lost another person he'd sent into danger. Did you get what we needed? Sent it by courier. Should arrive tomorrow or the next day. Pemberton will hold certification for 3 weeks, but Cole, there's more. Crowley's pushing legislative changes that could override Daniel's will entirely. We're running out of time faster than we thought. She swayed and Cole caught her, lifting her with easy strength despite her protests. Martinez, see to her horse. Maria, we need food and water. Miss Hayes looks half dead. I can walk. Shut up and let someone help you for once. But his voice had lost its harsh edge, replaced with something almost tender. He carried her inside, setting her in a chair by the table where Thomas and Lily sat with books open, their faces lighting up with joy and relief when they saw her. Miss Hayes! Thomas scrambled over and Lily was right behind him, both children pressing close like they feared she'd disappear again. You came back. You really came back. Of course I did. I promised, didn't I? Eleanor pulled them close despite her exhaustion, feeling their solid warmth, the trust they'd placed in her. Did you keep up with your studies? Every day. Cole even helped with the arithmetic, though he grumbled about it. Thomas's voice dropped. Is Jesse? I don't know. He was alive when I left him, but she couldn't finish, couldn't voice the guilt eating at her. Maria appeared with food and coffee, the sustenance Eleanor desperately needed. As she ate, Cole briefed her on ranch developments. More rustler activity, supply shipments delayed, Silas expected back within days. The list of problems felt endless, but beneath the recitation, Eleanor heard something new in Cole's voice. Not just concern, but partnership. He was updating her as an ally, not reporting to a subordinate. When the children were finally convinced she wouldn't disappear and allowed themselves to be shepherded to bed, Cole poured 2 glasses of whiskey and pushed one toward Eleanor. Drink. You look like you need it. She did, the alcohol burning away some of the exhaustion. The courier should have the documents here soon. Everything Pemberton needs to contest Silas's guardianship claim, plus proof of Crowley's manipulation. And if the legislative changes pass? If they override the will? Then we find another angle. We fight in the court of public opinion, make this about protecting orphans from greedy relatives. Newspapers love that kind of story. Eleanor set down the glass. But Cole, there's something else. Crowley knew I was in Austin. He had men watching Pemberton's office. Or Silas warned him, or he has sources we don't know about. Either way, he's organized, well-funded, and absolutely determined to get this ranch. Why? Cole's voice was harsh with frustration. It's not the best land, not the most profitable. There are bigger ranches, easier targets. Why is he so focused on this one? Eleanor had wondered the same thing during her long ride back, turning the question over until an answer emerged. What if it's not about the ranch itself? What if it's about what's under it or what it borders? Water rights, mineral deposits, strategic value for a railroad route. Cole's eyes sharpened. There was talk last year about a railroad spur connecting to the main line north. Surveyors came through, took measurements. Daniel threw them off the property, said he didn't want the noise and disruption. And if the ranch changes hands, if Crowley gets it, he could negotiate railroad access rights. That's worth more than cattle or land. That's permanent revenue for nothing but permission. Eleanor leaned forward. We need to find out what those surveyors discovered. If there's documented value beyond grazing land, it proves Crowley's motivation isn't benevolent, it's exploitative. Survey records would be in Austin, filed with the territorial office. Then we need someone there to dig them up. Someone Crowley wouldn't notice. Eleanor thought of Mrs. Patterson, of the network of respectable women who moved invisibly through male spaces. I might know someone, but I'd need to send a letter, need time we might not have. A knock at the door interrupted them, Martinez entering with an envelope. Courier just arrived, rode through the night. said it was urgent. Cole tore it open, reading quickly, his expression darkening. It's from Pemberton. Silas filed an emergency petition claiming the ranch is in imminent financial collapse, that the children are in danger, that immediate intervention is required. Judge scheduled a hearing for 2 weeks from yesterday. That's 11 days from now. Eleanor's mind raced. We'd need to prepare a defense, gather witnesses, present counter-evidence, and do it all while keeping this place running and watching for rustlers. Cole crumpled the paper, fury vibrating through him. We can't fight on this many fronts. We're outnumbered, outfunded, and running out of time. Eleanor wanted to argue, wanted to find the optimistic angle, but exhaustion and truth weighted her tongue. They were losing. Slowly, inevitably, they were losing. Then we changed the battlefield. The voice came from the doorway, and Eleanor turned to find Thomas standing there in his nightshirt, his face set with determination beyond his years. You taught me about asymmetrical warfare, Miss Hayes. When you can't win a direct fight, you change the terms of engagement. Cole looked at the boy with surprise and something close to pride. What are you thinking, Thomas? I'm thinking Crowley wants this ranch quiet, wants us to roll over and accept defeat. So we make noise. We make this fight public, messy, embarrassing for everyone involved. Thomas stepped forward, clutching a paper covered in his careful handwriting. I wrote letters. To newspapers, to politicians, to anyone who might care that a war hero's children are being cheated of their inheritance by a greedy uncle and a carpetbagger land speculator. Eleanor's throat tightened with emotion. Thomas, you taught me words are weapons, Miss Hayes. You taught me how to write a case, how to make people care. So I did. He handed her the paper, his young voice steady. I need your help making them better. But then we send them. We tell everyone what's happening, and we make Crowley fight us in the open where people can see what he really is. Cole read over Eleanor's shoulder, and she heard his sharp intake of breath as he took in Thomas's words. Carefully chosen, emotionally powerful, the story of two children fighting to save their father's dream while vultures circled. It was rough, needed polish, but the bones were solid. This is good, Cole said quietly. This is damn good, Thomas. Will it work? The boy's confidence cracked slightly, showing the frightened child underneath. It might. Eleanor met his eyes. It won't stop the legal battle, but it changes the context. Makes Silas and Crowley defend their actions publicly. That's worth trying. They worked through the night, Eleanor and Thomas refining the letters, while Cole wrote to every ranch hand who'd ever worked for Daniel, every supplier who'd been treated fairly, every person who might testify to Daniel's character and Cole's fitness as guardian. Maria made coffee and sandwiches, keeping them fueled while Lily slept peacefully, unaware of the battle being waged for her future. As dawn broke, they had 20 letters ready to mail, testimonials from 7 witnesses willing to travel to the hearing, and the beginning of a strategy that might, just might, give them a fighting chance. Cole found Eleanor on the porch as the sun rose, the letters ready to go into town with Martinez. She was watching the horizon, her face exhausted but determined. You should sleep, he said. You've been awake for 2 days. So have you. I'm used to it. You're not. He leaned against the rail beside her, close enough that she felt his warmth. Eleanor, what you did in Austin, the risks you took. Jesse took the real risks. I just ran. You got the information back. You survived. That matters. He turned to face her, and in the early light, his eyes were softer than she'd ever seen them. I was wrong about you, about teachers, about education, about everything. You're not making the kids soft. You're making them strong in ways I never could, and that scares the hell out of me. Why? Because it means I need you. The ranch needs you. Those kids need you. And everyone I've ever needed has died or left. His voice was raw with honesty. So yeah, when you didn't come back on time, when I thought Crowley might have killed you, it wasn't just about losing help. It was about losing... He stopped, the words caught somewhere between fear and admission. Eleanor's heart hammered, understanding crossing between them like electricity. Cole, don't. He straightened, walls slamming back into place. Don't say anything. We got a fight ahead, and I need to focus. We both do. But as he walked away, Eleanor saw the truth he wouldn't speak written in the rigid line of his shoulders, in the way his hands clenched with emotion he refused to acknowledge. He cared. Despite his armor, Despite his determination to feel nothing, he'd started to care about her beyond her utility as a teacher. And she, despite every lesson learned about maintaining professional distance, about not becoming entangled in the families she served, she cared back. Cared about this broken, dangerous man who carried weight that should have crushed him, but instead forged him into something stronger. Maria appeared beside her, 2 cups of fresh coffee in her hands. The way you two dance around each other, it would be funny if it were not so sad. There's nothing to dance around. We're fighting for the children's future, nothing more. Mentirosa. But Maria's smile was gentle. You forget I watch. I see how he looks at you when you are not watching, how you look at him when he turns away. Daniel and Anna were the same, 2 stubborn people who fought falling in love until they couldn't fight anymore. Cole's not in love with me. He's just adjusting to having help. Keep telling yourself that, Nina. Maybe one day you will believe it. Maria handed her the coffee. But for now, drink. We have 11 days to prepare for war, and warriors need their strength. Eleanor drank, tasting the bitter brew and the truth beneath Maria's words. 11 days to build a defense, to protect 2 children from being robbed of their heritage, to prove that knowledge and law could stand against greed and corruption. 11 days before everything they'd fought for would be decided in a courtroom where judges might not care about orphans' tears or dead men's dreams. She finished the coffee and went inside to wake the children. They had lessons to continue, letters to mail, and a ranch to save. The war wasn't over. It was only beginning. The letters went out the next morning with Martinez riding hard for town, carrying words that would either save them or condemn them to watch helplessly as everything Daniel Boone had built crumbled into Crowley's hands. Eleanor watched the dust trail of his departure and felt the weight of what they'd started. Once those letters reached newspapers and politicians, there would be no taking back the accusations, no quiet settlement. They'd declared war publicly, and Crowley would respond with everything he had. The response came faster than expected. 3 days after the letters were mailed, a rider arrived bearing an envelope sealed with wax and marked with the lawyer's stamp. Cole opened it at the kitchen table, Eleanor and Thomas reading over his shoulder, and the words hit like physical blows. Emergency injunction, Cole read aloud, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. Silas Boone petitions the court to remove all children from the ranch immediately, citing dangerous conditions, improper supervision, and recent violent incidents including arson and armed assault. He looked up, his eyes dark with fury. They're trying to take Thomas and Lily right now before the hearing, claiming we're endangering them. Can they do that? Thomas's voice cracked with fear, and Lily pressed against her brother, her small face pale. Eleanor's mind raced through everything she'd studied about guardianship law. An emergency injunction requires evidence of immediate danger. Silas would need to prove the children are at risk right now, not just claim it. He's got the rustler attacks, the barn burnings, the fact that you shot someone through the door. Cole's jaw tightened. A judge looking for reasons to rule in his favor will find them easy enough. When do they enforce it? Sheriff's expected within the week. We're to surrender the children to Silas's custody pending the full hearing. Cole's hands clenched into fists, which means Silas gets them somewhere. We can't protect them, can't prepare them, can't. We run. Thomas's voice cut through the tension, young, but absolutely certain. We take Lily and run before the sheriff comes. You said Pa taught you to track, to survive in the wild. We could hide until the hearing, come back when… No. Eleanor's voice was firm. Running makes us look guilty, makes it look like we're kidnapping you. That plays right into Silas's narrative that Cole is unfit, that we're dangerous. She met Cole's eyes across the table. We have to fight this legally, with witnesses and documentation, not by fleeing. You're asking me to hand those kids over to a man who wants to sell their inheritance? Cole's voice was dangerous, the careful control he maintained cracking. You're asking me to break the promise I made to Daniel that I'd protect them? I'm asking you to trust that law can protect them better than running. Because if we run, Cole, we lose. Not just the ranch, but any legal standing. Thomas and Lily become wards of the state, and Silas gets everything. Eleanor kept her voice steady despite the fear curling through her gut. But if we comply with the injunction while simultaneously fighting it, if we document every interaction and ensure witnesses are present, we maintain moral authority. Moral authority doesn't stop bad men from hurting children. No, but it gives us ammunition for the hearing, and it keeps you from becoming the outlaw Silas wants you to be. She reached across the table, touching his clenched fist. Cole, I know this goes against every instinct you have, but we can't win by playing into their hands. The silence stretched between them, heavy with consequences. Thomas watched Cole with desperate hope, and Lily's tears fell silently, her trust in adults already shattered by too many losses. Finally, Cole spoke, his voice like gravel. If anything happens to them while they're in Silas's custody, if he hurts them or scares them, then we'll have grounds for criminal charges, not just civil disputes. Eleanor squeezed his hand once before releasing it. I know it's a risk, but it's the only play that doesn't end with you in jail and the children lost to the system forever. Cole looked at Thomas and Lily, and Eleanor saw the agony of a man forced to choose between his instincts and his reason. What do you two want? This is your life we're deciding. Thomas straightened his shoulders, trying for bravery. I want to stay with you and Miss Hayes, but if we can't, if the law says we have to go with Uncle Silas for now. His voice wavered but held. I trust Miss Hayes. If she says this is how we win, then okay. But Cole, you promise you'll come get us when it's over? Promise you won't give up? Never. Cole's voice was rough with emotion. He couldn't quite hide. You're my word to your father, Thomas. I don't break my word. Lily whispered something Eleanor couldn't hear, and Thomas translated. She wants to know if Miss Hayes is coming to the hearing, to speak for us. Wild horses couldn't keep me away. Eleanor crouched to Lily's level, meeting those frightened eyes. I'm going to tell the judge exactly why you belong here, with Cole, with the ranch your father built for you, and I'm going to make him listen. The next days passed in frantic preparation. Eleanor drilled the children on what to say if questioned, how to document any mistreatment, how to be observant without being obvious. Cole worked like a man possessed, shoring up ranch operations so they could withstand his absence during the hearing, ensuring the men understood their orders if the worst happened and he didn't return. Martinez came back with news that made Eleanor's blood sing with hope and terror combined. The letters had been published. 3 major newspapers had run Thomas's story, and 2 politicians had made public statements calling for investigation into Crowley's land dealings. The court of public opinion was shifting, but it also meant Crowley now knew exactly what they were doing and would respond with proportional force. There's more, Martinez said, his expression troubled. Jesse's alive. Found him in a doctor's office in Millerville, shot up bad but breathing. Said to tell you the men who ambushed you were Crowley's. Overheard them talking about getting paid to stop the teacher from reaching Austin. Eleanor felt tears of relief and rage burn behind her eyes. Jesse was alive, but he'd been deliberately targeted, and they had proof now of Crowley's criminal intent. Will he testify? Doctor says he'll live, but travel's risky for another month at least. He wrote a statement, though, signed and witnessed. Martinez pulled a paper from his jacket. Everything he heard, everything he saw. It's not much, but it's something. Cole took the statement, reading with intensity. This puts Crowley at the center of criminal conspiracy, attempted murder, witness intimidation, maybe more. If we can get this in front of the judge, Silas will claim it's fabricated, that we paid Jesse to lie. Eleanor's legal training kicked in, seeing the argument from all angles. But combined with everything else, with the public pressure, with witness testimony about Crowley's character, it builds a pattern, makes it harder to dismiss as coincidence. The sheriff arrived on the 7th day, a weathered man named Hawkins who looked distinctly uncomfortable with his assignment. He handed Cole the court order with an apologetic expression that did nothing to soften the blow. I'm sorry, Riker. I don't like this any more than you do, but it's a legal order, and I've got to enforce it. Where's he taking them? Cole's voice was carefully controlled, but Eleanor could see the violence he was restraining. Silas has rooms at the Grand Hotel in Austin. Says he wants them where they can be properly cared for, educated, prepared for civilized life. Hawkins's tone suggested his opinion of that reasoning. You'll be able to visit, and the hearing's in 4 days. It's not forever. 4 days is a long time for children who've already lost everything. Eleanor stepped forward, her teacher's authority settling over her like armor. Sheriff Hawkins, I'd like to accompany the children. As their governess, I have a professional responsibility for their welfare. Hawkins looked relieved. Actually, ma'am, The order specifies you're to stay away from them. Silas claims you've been filling their heads with ideas, turning them against their rightful guardian. He had the grace to look embarrassed. I think it's nonsense, but it's what the paper says. Eleanor felt the trap snap shut. Separating her from the children meant they'd face Silas and Crowley alone, meant whatever pressure or manipulation Silas applied would go unwitnessed. It was brilliant strategy and utterly ruthless. Then I'm going to Austin anyway, Eleanor said. I can't be with them every moment, but I'll be close, and I'll be at that hearing ready to testify. Thomas and Lily packed their few belongings in silence, their faces showing the blank acceptance of children who'd learned hoping for better only brought more pain. Eleanor helped them, folding clothes and tucking in small treasures, Lily's rag doll, Thomas's collection of interesting rocks, a book of Daniel's that Thomas insisted on bringing. Remember what we practiced, Eleanor said softly as she checked Thomas's bag. You're smart, both of you. You can handle 4 days with Silas. What if he tries to make us sign something? Paper saying we want to sell the ranch. Thomas's fear bled through his attempted bravery. Don't sign anything. You're a minor, Thomas. Any contract you sign while under duress is invalid. Eleanor met his eyes. And if he pushes too hard, if he threatens or frightens you, tell Sheriff Hawkins. Make noise. Make sure people hear. Will Cole really come for us? Nothing in this world could stop him. You know that. Eleanor pulled him into a brief hug, feeling his thin shoulders shake with suppressed tears. You're your father's son. You're strong enough for this. Lily clung to Eleanor's skirt, her whispered goodbye barely audible. Eleanor lifted her, holding tight, memorizing the weight of this small girl who'd already survived so much. Be brave for your brother. He's trying to be brave for you. Eleanor set her down gently. And remember, this isn't forever, just 4 days. The goodbye with Cole happened on the porch, out of the sheriff's hearing. Thomas stood straight, trying for the man he wasn't yet, and Cole's hand on his shoulder carried the weight of promises and protection. You're in charge while you're gone. You protect your sister, and you don't let anyone tell you your father's dreams were foolish. Cole's voice was rough. And Thomas, if something goes really wrong, if you think you're in real danger, you run. You get out however you can, and you head for Pemberton's office. He'll protect you until I can get there. Yes, sir. I mean it. Silas is blood, but blood doesn't always mean safety. You feel threatened. You act. Cole's eyes were fierce. Your father taught you to trust your instincts. Trust them now. They left in Hawkins's wagon, 2 small figures growing smaller with distance, and Eleanor watched until they disappeared completely. Beside her, Cole stood rigid with the effort of letting them go, of not mounting his horse and taking them back by force. We did the right thing, Eleanor said, trying to convince herself as much as him. Did we? Or did we just hand them to the enemy because we're too civilized to fight dirty? We're fighting, Cole, just on a different battlefield. Eleanor turned to him, seeing the raw pain he couldn't hide. And in 4 days, we're going to walk into that courtroom and destroy Silas's case piece by piece. You sound certain. I'm terrified, but I'm also angry, and anger's useful. She managed a grim smile. My father used to say the most dangerous opponent isn't the one who's fearless. It's the one who's afraid but fights anyway because something matters more than fear. Cole looked at her for a long moment, and something shifted in his expression, not softening exactly, but recognition. You really believe we can win this? I believe we have to try. Those children deserve people who'll fight for them, even when fighting looks impossible. Eleanor met his gaze steadily. And I believe you're exactly the kind of stubborn, impossible man who doesn't know how to quit. So yes, Cole, I believe we can win. He almost smiled then, a brief ghost of warmth in his weathered face. You know what you're getting into? Testifying against Silas means attacking a respectable businessman in open court. You'll be cross-examined, your past investigated, every decision questioned. They'll try to make you look like a radical or a liar, or worse. Let them try. I've faced worse than lawyers. Eleanor straightened her spine. When do we leave for Austin? Tomorrow morning. I want 1 more day to ensure the ranch can survive without us. He paused, then added quietly, and I want you to rest. You've barely slept in 2 weeks, and you'll need every bit of strength for what's coming." That night, Eleanor lay in her small room listening to the ranch settle into uneasy quiet. Without the children's presence, the house felt hollow, haunted by absence. She tried to sleep, but her mind raced through testimony, through arguments she'd need to make, through every possible way Silas's lawyers might attack. A soft knock pulled her from spiraling thoughts. "Miss Hayes, it's Maria. May I come in?" "Of course." Maria entered carrying tea and the kind of determined expression that meant she had things to say whether Eleanor wanted to hear them or not. She set down the cups and sat on the edge of the cot, her weathered hands wrapped around the warmth. "You are afraid," Maria said. "Not a question." "Terrified. What if I fail them? What if my testimony isn't enough? What if the judge doesn't care about orphans' rights or Daniel's wishes?" Eleanor's voice cracked. "What if I lose those children everything?" "Then you will have tried. That is more than most would do." Maria's eyes were gentle. "But I think you will not fail. You have something those lawyers and judges do not expect." "What?" "Truth and love. You love those children, even though you try to pretend you are only their teacher. You love this ranch, this hard place that has broken so many. And Cole," Maria smiled slightly, "you love him too, though you fight admitting it as hard as he does." Eleanor started to deny it, but the words died on her tongue. Because Maria was right. Somewhere between teaching lessons and fighting rustlers, between burning barns and midnight preparations for war, she'd fallen in love with 2 grieving children and a broken man who'd learned to armor himself in hardness because softness meant pain. "It doesn't matter what I feel. After the hearing, assuming we win, I'll need to find another position. This was always temporary." "Was it? Or have you been telling yourself that because leaving is safer than staying?" Maria set down her tea. "Daniel taught me something when Anna died and he thought he could not survive the grief. He said loving people means risking loss, but refusing to love means losing yourself. You understand?" "I understand. I'm just not sure I'm brave enough to act on it." "You ran into a burning building, Nina. You faced down armed men, rode through hostile territory, challenged powerful men who would destroy you without hesitation. You are brave enough for anything." Maria stood, moving to the door. "Sleep now. Tomorrow you go to war, and warriors need their rest." After she left, Eleanor lay in the darkness thinking about love and loss, about children who needed her, and a man who'd die before admitting he might need anyone. She thought about her father's lessons, about being harder than the hard country, and realized that being hard didn't mean being cold. It meant being strong enough to care despite knowing care meant vulnerability. She slept finally, and dreamed of courtrooms that turned into battlefields, of children's voices calling for help she couldn't provide, of Cole's face disappearing into smoke and shadow while she screamed without sound. She woke before dawn with clarity she hadn't possessed before. They would win this hearing or they would lose everything trying. There was no middle ground, no compromise that left the children safe and the ranch intact. It was victory or destruction, and Eleanor had never been good at accepting defeat. Cole found her on the porch as the sun rose, already dressed and ready to travel. He carried 2 cups of coffee and the look of a man who'd also spent the night preparing for war. "You didn't sleep," he observed. "Neither did you." "I was checking weapons, planning contingencies if things go wrong." He handed her the coffee. "You were probably planning legal arguments. And contingencies if things go wrong." Eleanor sipped the bitter brew. "Are we ready for this?" "No, but we're going anyway." Cole looked out at the ranch, at the land Daniel had built from nothing and died protecting. "I've been thinking about what you said, about fighting on different battlefields. And you're right. I can't beat Silas and Crowley with guns and threats, but you can beat them with words and law and the kind of civilized warfare I never learned. We beat them together. Your testimony matters as much as mine. You're the man Daniel trusted with his children's future. That means something." "Does it? Or am I just a foreman who's forgotten his place, who let a Boston teacher convince him words matter as much as action?" But there was no heat in his words, just exhaustion and the weight of responsibility. "You're a man who keeps promises even when keeping them costs everything, and that matters more than pedigree or respectability." Eleanor set down her cup. "Cole, when we win this—" "If we win." "When we win," she insisted, "what happens next? You've been so focused on fighting for the children's future, you haven't thought about yours. My future is keeping this place running until Thomas can take over. That's all I need. Is it? Or is that just the safe answer because planning for more means hoping for more? Eleanor turned to face him fully. Maria said something last night about love being worth the risk of loss. I think she's right. Cole's expression shuddered. Eleanor, don't. I'm not asking for promises or declarations. I'm just saying, after we fight this battle, after we win or lose, don't disappear back into being nothing but the foreman. Don't pretend the last weeks didn't happen. She held his gaze. You're more than your job, Cole, and those children need you to be more. They need someone who can show them strength and softness can coexist. I don't know how to be soft. It got beaten out of me a long time ago. Then learn. Let them teach you the way they've been teaching me that love doesn't make you weak. It makes you brave enough to fight for what matters. Eleanor's voice softened. I've watched you with them. The way you look at Thomas when he masters something difficult, the way you slow down for Lily even when you're rushing. That's not hardness, Cole. That's love you're too stubborn to name. He looked away, jaw tight with emotion he wouldn't release. If we lose tomorrow, if the judge gives them to Silas and there's nothing we can do, I don't know if I can survive that. Losing Daniel broke something in me. Losing his children too might finish the job. Then we don't lose. Eleanor's voice carried absolute conviction. We walk into that courtroom and we fight with everything we have. And we remind that judge that laws exist to protect children, not to serve greedy men's ambitions. They rode out an hour later, Martinez and two other hands accompanying them as both protection and witnesses. The journey to Austin passed in tense silence, each mile bringing them closer to confrontation that would decide everything. They arrived late afternoon to find the city buzzing with news of the hearing. Thomas's letters had done their work, and public interest was high enough that crowds were expected at the courthouse. Eleanor checked into Mrs. Patterson's boarding house again, the widow's face lighting up with recognition and concern. I read about those poor children in the papers. Terrible business. Family fighting over them like property. Mrs. Patterson showed Eleanor to the same room. You need anything at all, you let me know. I don't hold with grown men stealing from orphans. That evening, Eleanor met with Pemberton in his office, Cole standing silent and watchful as she reviewed their strategy. The lawyer looked older than he had weeks ago, the weight of the case showing in new lines around his eyes. Public opinion is with you, which helps. But Judge Thornton is old school, believes in traditional authority structures. He won't like children defying their uncle, won't like a foreman challenging a property owner. Pemberton's expression was grave. And Silas has retained Maxwell and Sons out of Dallas. They're expensive, ruthless, and very good at winning cases that shouldn't be winnable. What's our strongest argument? Eleanor asked. Daniel's will. It's clear, properly executed, and specifies his wishes explicitly. The question is whether Thornton will honor those wishes or find loopholes to justify giving Silas control. Pemberton looked at Cole. Your testimony is crucial. You need to show you're responsible, stable, capable of providing proper guardianship. But you also can't appear threatening or violent. These lawyers will try to provoke you, make you lose your temper. I can handle lawyers, but Cole's voice was tight. Can you? Because one wrong word, one flash of anger, and they'll paint you as exactly the dangerous influence Silas claims you are. Pemberton's tone was harsh but necessary. I need you controlled, articulate, and absolutely unshakable. Miss Hayes can be passionate, that plays to sympathy, but you need to be the rock, the steady, reliable guardian who prioritizes the children's welfare above everything. Eleanor watched Cole absorb this, saw him wrestling with the need to suppress everything that made him effective in his world. The quick decisions, the commanding presence, the willingness to meet violence with violence. He was being asked to become someone else for the length of a trial, and she could see the cost of that transformation already weighing on him. I'll do what's needed, Cole said finally. Just tell me what you want me to say. They prepared through the evening and into the night, Pemberton coaching them on testimony, on how to answer questions, on the legal traps that might be laid. Eleanor's head ached from the concentration, from the pressure of knowing every word tomorrow might determine the children's future. Near midnight, Pemberton finally released them. Get some rest. The hearing starts at 9 and it'll likely run all day. Pace yourselves, stay hydrated, and remember, you're not just fighting for the ranch, you're fighting for the right of Daniel's children to honor their father's wishes. Keep that front and center, and we have a chance. Outside, walking back toward the boarding house, Cole stopped suddenly. His face turned toward the grand hotel where Thomas and Lily were sleeping. I want to see them, just for a moment, just to know they're all right. Cole, the injunction? I know, but they're up there, probably scared, probably wondering if we've abandoned them. And I'm down here useless. His voice cracked slightly. How do you stand it, caring about people and being powerless to protect them? You do what you can with what you have, and tomorrow, what we have is a courtroom and the truth. That'll have to be enough. Eleanor touched his arm gently. They know you haven't abandoned them, Thomas especially. He understands what you're doing and why. He's 10. He shouldn't have to understand adult betrayals and legal battles. He should be learning to rope cattle and reading adventure books and being a child. Cole's hands clenched. Daniel wanted better for them than this constant fighting. Daniel gave them you, a man who'd fight impossible battles to keep a promise to a dead friend. That's better than wealth or comfort. That's someone who'll stand when everyone else runs. Eleanor's voice softened. And he gave them me, apparently. Someone stubborn enough to believe teaching matters even in a place where survival matters more. Cole looked at her then, really looked, and in the lamplight his eyes held something Eleanor had never seen before. Not just gratitude or respect, but something deeper, more dangerous. Something that looked like the beginnings of trust and the terrifying possibility of more. When this is over, he said quietly, when we've won or lost and the dust settles, stay. Don't look for another position. Don't go back to Boston. Stay at the ranch and keep teaching Thomas and Lily. Keep fixing our accounts and arguing with me about whether books matter. Just stay. Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs. Cole, I'm not asking for more than that. I know I'm not. I know what I am and what I can't be. But those kids need you. The ranch needs you. He paused, something vulnerable crossing his face. I need you. Even if I'm terrible at admitting it and worse at showing it. It wasn't a declaration of love. It wasn't even close to the romance Eleanor had read about in novels, with poetry and passion and grand gestures. It was a hard man admitting need, which might be the most honest thing anyone had ever offered her. Ask me again after tomorrow, Eleanor said softly. When we know if there's a ranch to stay at, if there are children to teach. When we know whether this fight was worth everything we've risked. And if we lose? If Silas wins and sells everything, and the children end up in his custody in Dallas, somewhere far from the only home they remember? Then I'll follow them. I'll find a position in Dallas, and I'll make damn sure they know at least one adult kept their promises. Eleanor's voice was fierce. But we're not going to lose, Cole. Tomorrow, we're going to walk into that courtroom, and we're going to fight for those children like their future depends on it. Because it does. He nodded slowly, something in his posture easing fractionally. All right then. Tomorrow, we fight. They parted at the boarding house, Cole heading to the small hotel where he'd taken a room, Eleanor climbing stairs that felt steeper than they should. She lay awake long into the night, her mind rehearsing testimony and arguments, preparing for a battle that would be waged with words instead of weapons, but would be no less brutal for it. Somewhere across the city, Thomas and Lily were sleeping under Silas's roof, probably afraid, possibly being pressured or manipulated, definitely wondering if the adults who'd promised to protect them would actually come through this time. Eleanor had made a lot of promises in her life. She'd broken some, kept others, learned that words mattered less than actions when trust was the currency being traded. Tomorrow, she would keep her promise. She would walk into that courtroom and fight for two children who deserved better than they'd been given. She would speak truth to power, challenge authority with law, and prove that sometimes the most dangerous weapon was a woman who refused to shut up when powerful men demanded silence. She slept finally, dreamlessly, and woke to the sound of church bells marking the dawn of Judgment Day. The courthouse was already crowded when they arrived, public interest having drawn spectators like a theatrical performance. Eleanor wore her best dress, her hair pinned severely, her face a mask of calm confidence that hid the terror churning underneath. Cole walked beside her in clean clothes that looked uncomfortable on his frame, his face set in grim determination. Pemberton met them at the entrance, his expression unreadable. Silas and his lawyers are already inside, so are Thomas and Lily. I managed to get word to the children that you're here, that you're fighting for them. He paused. Miss Hayes, before we go in, are you absolutely certain you want to testify? Once you're on that stand, they'll come after you with everything. Your past, your credentials, your motivations, nothing will be off limits. Eleanor thought of two children watching from somewhere inside that courtroom, waiting to see if the adults would fight or fold. She thought of Cole's rough promise that he'd come for them no matter what. She thought of Daniel Boone, who'd built dreams from dust and died believing knowledge mattered as much as strength. I'm certain, she said. Let's go win this. They walked through the courthouse doors together, into a battle that would be decided by words and law, and the hope that justice sometimes, against all odds, actually prevailed. The war had reached its decisive moment. Everything they'd fought for, everything they'd risked, it all came down to what happened in the next hours. Eleanor took her seat in the courtroom, saw Thomas and Lily across the aisle with Silas, saw their faces light up with desperate hope when they spotted her. She smiled at them, projecting confidence she didn't entirely feel, and prepared to fight the most important battle of her life. Judge Thornton entered the courtroom like a thundercloud given human form, his black robes and silver beard lending him the appearance of authority carved from stone. He surveyed the packed gallery with disapproval, his gavel striking once to silence the murmuring crowd. This is a court of law, not a circus. I will have order, or I will clear this room. His voice carried the weight of decades delivering verdicts. We are here to determine the matter of guardianship for Thomas Daniel Boone and Lily Ann Boone, orphaned children of the late Daniel Robert Boone. Counsel, are you prepared? Silas's lawyer stood. A man named Harrison Maxwell. Expensive suit and calculating eyes. We are, Your Honor. The petitioner is prepared to demonstrate that the current arrangement poses demonstrable harm to these children and that their uncle, Silas Boone, represents their best hope for a stable, civilized future. Pemberton rose with deliberate calm. The respondents are also prepared, Your Honor. We will show that Daniel Boone's clearly stated wishes, properly documented and legally binding, should be honored, and that Cole Riker has proven himself a capable and devoted guardian. Very well. Mr. Maxwell, call your first witness. Silas took the stand with the confident ease of a man accustomed to being believed. He wore grief like a tailored suit, convincing on the surface, but Eleanor could see the calculation underneath. Maxwell guided him through testimony designed to paint Cole as dangerous and Eleanor as a radical influence corrupting innocent children. Mr. Boone, in your own words, describe the conditions you observed when you last visited the ranch. It was chaos, Your Honor. The barn had just burned, there'd been violence, gunfire. My nephew and niece were traumatized, clearly frightened, and this woman, Silas gestured toward Eleanor with practiced disdain. This governess from Boston was teaching them to question authority, to resist family guidance, to believe they knew better than their elders. Objection, Pemberton said mildly. Characterization without evidence. Sustained. Stick to facts, Mr. Boone. The facts are that my brother's children are living in a war zone, being raised by a violent foreman with no education and a radical teacher with no respect for proper order. That's not a home, Your Honor. That's a disaster waiting to claim 2 more lives. Maxwell continued the assault with surgical precision, building a narrative of danger and dysfunction. Ranch hands quitting, financial troubles, rustler attacks. Eleanor's shooting of an intruder presented as evidence of lawlessness rather than self-defense. By the time Silas stepped down, the courtroom murmured with uncertainty, and Eleanor could see doubt creeping into some spectators' faces. Crowley testified next, his performance masterful in its false sympathy. He presented himself as a concerned citizen trying to help a struggling family, offering fair market value for a property that was clearly failing. When Pemberton pressed him on his business dealings, on the railroad connection, Crowley deflected smoothly. I'm a businessman, counselor. I identify opportunity. If there happens to be future value in rail access, that's simply good planning. It doesn't change the fact that the Boone Ranch is hemorrhaging money, and those children deserve better than watching their inheritance crumble into debt. Isn't it true that you stand to profit substantially if the ranch sells? that railroad access rights alone could be worth 50 times the purchase price. Objection, speculation. Overruled. Answer the question, Mr. Crowley. Crowley smiled thinly. I might profit, yes. That's how business works. But my profit doesn't negate the children's need for stability and proper guardianship. Eleanor watched Thomas across the aisle, saw the boy's hands clenched white-knuckle tight, saw Lily pressing against her brother with the desperate hope that someone would see through the lies. The injustice of it burned in Eleanor's throat. These men in expensive suits deciding the fate of children they'd never bothered to know, reducing Daniel's dreams to line items in a profit calculation. Maxwell called two of the previous governesses, both testifying to the ranch's harsh conditions and Cole's allegedly tyrannical management. Their stories were carefully crafted half-truths. Yes, conditions were hard, but that was frontier life, not abuse. Yes, Cole was demanding, but he was teaching survival, not cruelty. But presented in Maxwell's framework, their words became weapons against everything Eleanor and Cole had fought to build. By midday, when the court recessed for lunch, the battle felt lost before it had truly begun. Pemberton's expression was grim as they huddled in a small anteroom. They're winning the narrative. We need to shift this hard and fast when we come back, or Thornton will rule in Silas's favor by end of day. Put me on the stand, Cole said, his voice tight with controlled fury. Let me tell them what Daniel actually wanted, what kind of father he was, what he built, and why. Well, you're our strongest witness, but also our most vulnerable. Maxwell will try to break you, make you lose your temper. Pemberton looked at Eleanor. Miss Hayes goes first. She establishes credibility, humanizes the children, creates emotional context. Then we bring you in, and you deliver the factual testimony about Daniel's wishes and your guardianship. Eleanor nodded, her mouth dry with fear and determination combined. What about Thomas? Can he testify? He's 10. Thornton might allow it, but Maxwell will eat him alive on cross-examination. It's a risk. Everything's a risk at this point. Eleanor thought of the letters Thomas had written, the intelligence and courage in those words. But that boy has more strength than most adults I've known. If we prep him right, if we let him tell his truth, it might be exactly what tips the scales. Your call, Pemberton said. But if we use him and it goes wrong, we can't undo that damage. The afternoon session opened with Eleanor taking the stand, her heart hammering but her face calm. She placed her hand on the Bible for the oath, and the irony wasn't lost on her, swearing before the law to tell truth that law might not want to hear. Pemberton's questions were gentle, designed to establish her credentials and character. She described her education, her 8 years teaching in various households, her decision to come to Texas because the challenge called to something deeper than comfort. Miss Hayes, in your professional opinion as an educator, what is the children's current state of mind and development? Thomas and Lily are exceptionally intelligent children dealing with profound grief in the healthiest way they can. Thomas reads at a 7th grade level, excels at mathematics, and has shown remarkable aptitude for understanding complex legal and ethical concepts. Lily, despite her trauma and selective mutism, is making steady progress in basic literacy and has begun to re-engage with the world around her. Eleanor kept her voice steady, professional. They're not damaged or wild, Your Honor. They're healing. And they're doing it in the only home they've ever known, surrounded by people who love their father and are determined to honor his wishes. Has Cole Riker been a good guardian in your observation? He's been an excellent guardian, firm when necessary, gentle when possible, and absolutely devoted to their welfare. He maintains discipline while allowing them autonomy. He teaches practical skills while encouraging their education. He's exactly what their father wanted for them, someone strong enough to protect them and wise enough to let them grow. Maxwell rose for cross-examination like a predator scenting blood. Miss Hayes, you're not married, correct? That's correct. No children of your own? No. Yet you presume to know what's best for these orphans better than their own uncle, their blood relative? I presume to observe and report on their educational and emotional development. That's my profession, Mr. Maxwell. What's yours? Manipulating law to serve wealthy clients regardless of morality. The gallery gasped and Thornton's gavel cracked. Miss Hayes, you will answer questions without editorializing. My apologies, Your Honor. But Eleanor didn't look apologetic. and she saw the flash of satisfaction in Pemberton's eyes. She'd landed a hit. Maxwell recovered smoothly. You shot a man, did you not? Fired a weapon through the door of the Boone residence? I did. He was attempting to break in during a rustler attack. I protected the children I was hired to teach and care for. So you admit to violence? To taking law into your own hands? I admit to defending children from men who would have harmed them. If that's a crime in Texas, then the law is broken, not my actions. Eleanor leaned forward slightly. Would you have preferred I let him in? Let him do whatever he intended to two defenseless children while the men were fighting fires and protecting livestock? Objection. Argumentative. Sustained. Miss Hayes, answer the questions asked. Maxwell shifted tactics, probing her background, her motivations, trying to paint her as a radical feminist who'd poisoned the children against traditional values. Eleanor deflected each attack with calm precision, refusing to be provoked into the emotional outburst he wanted. Isn't it true that you've encouraged Thomas to challenge his uncle's authority, that you've taught him to question adult guidance? I've taught him to think critically, to understand his legal rights, and to recognize when adults might not have his best interests at heart. If that's radical, Mr. Maxwell, then every school in Boston is a hotbed of revolution. Eleanor's voice carried steel. His father wanted him educated, not obedient. There's a difference. When she finally stepped down, Eleanor's hands were shaking, but her head was high. She'd held her ground, and from the murmuring in the gallery, at least some people were questioning Silas's narrative. Cole took the stand next, his discomfort with the formal setting palpable, but his voice steady. Pemberton guided him through his history with Daniel, the friendship forged in war and strengthened in peace, the promise made on a dying man's lips to protect his children and preserve his legacy. Mr. Riker, tell the court what Daniel Boone said to you in his final moments. Cole's jaw tightened, emotion breaking through his careful control. He said, take care of them. Don't let Silas sell their future for easy money. Teach Thomas everything, keep Lily safe, and make sure they know their father believed in more than just survival. Those were his words, Your Honor. His dying wish. And have you honored that wish? I've tried. Every day I've tried. Cole looked directly at Thomas and Lily, his voice rough. I'm not their father. I can't replace him. But I've given them everything I've got, protection, guidance, the truth about what this land demands and what it can give. And I've kept that ranch alive so when Thomas is old enough, he'll have the choice Daniel wanted him to have. Maxwell's cross-examination was brutal, attacking Cole's education, his temper, his fitness to raise children in civilized society. But Cole held firm, answering each accusation with quiet dignity that Eleanor suspected cost him tremendous effort. You have no formal education, correct, Mr. Riker? None past basic schooling, but I can read, write, keep accounts, and teach a boy how to survive in country that kills the unprepared. That's the education Daniel valued. You've killed men, haven't you, during the war and after? Yes. Cole's voice was flat. I was a soldier, and this is Texas. Violence happens. But I've never raised a hand to those children, never threatened them, never done anything but protect them from a world that's already taken too much. Yet you burned their father's books, destroyed the educational materials Daniel Boone valued. Cole flinched, and Eleanor held her breath. This was the wound Maxwell had been probing for, the moment that could break Cole's credibility. I did, Cole said quietly. And it was wrong. I was angry at losing my friend, angry at a world where knowledge didn't save him, angry at everything, so I burned books because I couldn't burn the grief. Miss Hayes made me understand that was destroying Daniel's legacy, not preserving it, and I've regretted it every day since. The admission hung in the silent courtroom, and Eleanor saw Thornton's expression shift fractionally. Honesty, painful and raw, carried weight that polished lies couldn't match. Pemberton called witnesses next, ranch hands who testified to Cole's character, to the children's well-being, to the stability of the operation despite challenges. Martinez's testimony about Jesse's ambush brought gasps from the gallery, and the written statement from Jesse himself describing Crowley's men and their orders to stop Eleanor cast new shadows over Silas's claims of innocent concern. But it was Thomas's testimony that changed everything. Pemberton had prepped him carefully, but when the boy took the stand, small and brave, in clothes that were too formal for his wiry frame, Eleanor saw something in Thornton's expression soften. This wasn't theory anymore, wasn't legal argument. This was a child who'd lost everything, asking adults to honor his father's dreams. "Thomas, do you understand why we're here today?" Pemberton's voice was gentle. "Yes, sir. Uncle Silas wants to sell our ranch and take us to the city. Cole and Miss Hayes are trying to stop him because that's not what Pa wanted." "What did your father want?" Thomas's voice steadied, years of pain crystallizing into clarity. "He wanted us to learn, not just book learning, though he valued that, but learning about the land, about work, about building something that matters. He said," the boy's voice cracked, but he pushed through. "He said the ranch was our legacy, that when I turned 18 it would be mine to run or sell as I chose. But it had to be my choice, not Uncle Silas's, not anyone else's." "Are you happy living with Mr. Riker and Miss Hayes?" "Happy isn't the right word. Pa's dead. Ma's dead. I'm not sure I'll ever be happy like before. But I'm learning to live again. Cole teaches me to ride, to work cattle, to survive. Miss Hayes teaches me to read, to think, to understand the world beyond the ranch. Together, they're teaching me everything Pa wanted me to know." Thomas looked directly at Thornton, his young face fierce. "Please, sir, don't take us away from the only home we remember. Don't let Uncle Silas sell what Pa built. Let me grow up there, and when I'm old enough, I'll make my own choice about the ranch's future, just like Pa wanted." Maxwell's cross-examination was mercifully brief. Even he seemed to recognize that attacking a bereaved child too aggressively would backfire. He tried to suggest Thomas had been coached, manipulated, but the boy's genuine emotion and clear intelligence made those accusations ring hollow. When Thomas stepped down, Eleanor saw tears on faces throughout the gallery. Lily had been crying silently through her brother's testimony, and when Thomas returned to his seat, she buried her face against his shoulder. Pemberton rested their case, and Maxwell presented rebuttal witnesses. Financial experts claiming the ranch was failing, child welfare advocates arguing the children needed civilization's benefits, a parade of respectable voices drowning out the truth in bureaucratic noise. Finally, as afternoon light slanted through high windows, both sides rested. Thornton called a 30-minute recess to review materials and prepare his decision. Eleanor sat with Cole in the anteroom, neither speaking, both knowing that everything now rested with one man's judgment. "Whatever happens," Cole said finally, "you fought like hell. Daniel would have been proud." "We both fought, and we're not done yet." Eleanor's hands were clenched tight. "Thornton's not a cruel man. I saw his face during Thomas's testimony. He was moved." Moved doesn't always mean merciful. Law's not about emotion. But justice should be. And sometimes, if we're lucky, law and justice align. The bailiff called them back, and the courtroom filled with expectant tension. Thornton took his seat, his expression unreadable, and Eleanor felt her heart hammering against her ribs like it might break through. "I've reviewed the materials, heard the testimony, and considered the law." Thornton's voice carried the weight of consequences. "This case presents competing goods, a blood relative offering financial stability versus a chosen guardian offering continuity and honoring a father's wishes. The law generally favors blood ties, but that's a presumption, not an absolute." Eleanor's hands gripped Cole's arm, and she felt his muscles rigid with tension. Daniel Boone's will is clear and properly executed. His wishes regarding his children's upbringing and the ranch's future are documented and witnessed. While Silas Boone is technically the ranch owner, the will stipulates that sale requires the guardian's consent, and the children's welfare must take precedence over financial considerations. Thornton paused, and Eleanor couldn't breathe. Furthermore, the testimony regarding Mr. Crowley's involvement and the suspicious circumstances surrounding the attempt to stop Miss Hayes suggests motivations beyond simple concern for the children. Silas shifted uncomfortably, and Crowley's face had gone carefully blank. That said, the conditions at the ranch are undeniably harsh. Violence has occurred, financial troubles are documented, and the children have been exposed to dangers that would not exist in a more civilized environment. Mr. Riker's fitness as a guardian is questionable by traditional standards. He lacks formal education, has a history of violence, and operates in a world where might often precedes right. Eleanor felt hope dying in her chest, felt Cole's arm trembling under her grip. However, Thornton's voice hardened, Traditional standards are not the only standards, and the law is not merely about property and procedure, it's about justice. Thomas Boone spoke clearly about his father's wishes and his own preferences. That child has suffered tremendous loss, yet he demonstrates intelligence, courage, and a clear understanding of what he wants for his future. To ignore that voice would be to reduce him to property, a thing to be disposed of according to adult convenience. The judge looked at Silas with something approaching contempt. "Mr. Boone, you've shown little interest in your brother's ranch for years. You've made no secret of your desire to sell, to profit, to move on. Your concern for the children appears recent and convenient, coinciding precisely with their value as leverage in a property dispute. That does not inspire confidence in your guardianship." Silas's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, my client's motivations are transparent, Counselor. Sit down." Thornton turned to Cole, his expression softening fractionally. "Mr. Riker, you're rough, unpolished, and by conventional standards, an unlikely guardian. But you've demonstrated loyalty, devotion, and a genuine commitment to honoring Daniel Boone's wishes. More importantly, those children trust you. Thomas spoke of you with respect and affection that cannot be manufactured or coached." Eleanor's heart began to pound with something that might be hope. "Therefore, my ruling is as follows." Thornton's gavel hand raised. "Guardianship of Thomas and Lily Boone remains with Cole Riker until Thomas reaches his majority at 18, as specified in Daniel Boone's will. The ranch cannot be sold without the guardian's consent and demonstration that such sale serves the children's best interests, not merely Silas Boone's financial interests. The emergency injunction removing the children from the ranch is dissolved immediately, and they are to be returned to Mr. Riker's custody forthwith." The gavel struck, and the courtroom erupted. Eleanor couldn't hear the rest over the roaring in her ears, couldn't see through the tears that blurred her vision. They'd won, against impossible odds, against wealth and power, and legal machinery designed to favor men like Silas. They'd won. Cole sat frozen beside her, his face a mask of shock gradually giving way to something like wonder. Across the aisle, Thomas had grabbed Lily and was holding her while she cried, both children's faces transformed by joy so fierce it hurt to witness. Silas was on his feet, his lawyer arguing furiously, but Thornton cut him off with a sharp gesture. "The ruling stands, Counselor. If you wish to appeal, that's your right. But until such appeal is heard and decided, Cole Riker is the legal guardian, and the ranch remains protected by Daniel Boone's will. Court is adjourned." The gavel struck again, final and absolute. People surged forward, ranch hands congratulating Cole, spectators wanting to shake Pemberton's hand, reporters shouting questions. Eleanor pushed through the chaos toward the children, reaching them just as Thomas broke free of official constraints and ran to her. She caught him, holding tight while he shook with relief and residual fear. And then Lily was there too, her small arms wrapping around Eleanor's waist, her whispered, "Thank you," barely audible over the noise. Cole appeared beside them, and Thomas turned to him with a question Eleanor saw rather than heard over the din. Cole nodded, and Thomas launched himself at the tall foreman, trusting absolutely that he'd be caught. Cole lifted him easily, one arm around the boy, his other hand gentle on Lily's head. For a moment they stood like that, a fractured family held together by will and choice rather than blood, by promises kept when breaking them would have been easier. Eleanor met Cole's eyes over Thomas's shoulder and saw everything he couldn't say written in that gaze. Gratitude, relief, and something deeper that neither of them was quite ready to name. Pemberton extracted them from the courthouse chaos, guiding them to his office where they could breathe without reporters and well-wishers crushing them. The lawyer poured whiskey for the adults, water for the children, and allowed himself a rare smile. "That was closer than I'd like, but we prevailed. Thornton's ruling is solid, barring a successful appeal, which I doubt given the publicity and public sentiment. The children stay with Cole and the ranch remains protected." "What about Crowley?" Eleanor asked, "and the railroad scheme?" "With this ruling, Crowley's leverage disappears. He can't force a sale through Silas, can't manipulate the children into giving up their rights. The railroad will have to negotiate with Cole directly if they want access, and Cole can demand terms that actually benefit the ranch." Pemberton's smile widened. "You've won more than guardianship. You've secured the children's entire future." Thomas, who'd been unnaturally quiet since the verdict, finally spoke. "Is it really over?" Uncle Silas can't take us away? Not unless you choose to go when you're 18, or unless circumstances change dramatically. Pemberton looked at Cole. You're their guardian now, legally and officially. That comes with responsibilities and powers. Use them wisely. I will. Cole's voice was rough. We will. They left Austin the next morning, the children riding with Cole while Eleanor traveled alongside Martinez and the other hands. The journey back felt different, lighter somehow, despite the same hard miles and unforgiving sun. They'd left as people fighting for survival and returned as people who'd claimed their future through will and law combined. The ranch appeared on the horizon like a promise kept, and Eleanor saw Thomas straighten in his saddle, saw Lily's face brighten with recognition of home. Maria stood on the porch waiting, and when they rode into the yard, she swept both children into embraces that spoke of worry transformed to joy. That evening, as the sun painted the Texas sky in shades of fire and gold, Eleanor found Cole on the porch watching the land he'd fought so hard to preserve. The children were inside with Maria, eating stew and recounting the trial in dramatic terms that would grow more elaborate with each telling. You're staying? Not a question, but not quite a statement either. Cole's voice carried hope wrapped in uncertainty. If the offer still stands. Eleanor joined him at the rail, close enough to feel his warmth. Someone needs to teach those children, keep your accounts honest, and argue with you about the value of books. The offer stands, more than stands. He turned to face her, and in the fading light his features had softened from the harsh lines she'd first seen. Eleanor, I'm not good at this. At saying what I feel, at being anything but hard. But you've become something I didn't know I needed, something I can't imagine this place without. That might be the longest speech I've heard from you that didn't involve work orders or defensive positions. Eleanor smiled, but her heart was pounding. For what it's worth, you've become something I didn't know I was looking for, a reason to stay in one place, to build instead of just passing through. I don't know what this becomes. Don't know if I can be the kind of man you'd want for more than just working together. His honesty was painful in its rawness. But I know I want to try. Want to see if hard and soft can coexist, like you said. Want to be more than just the foreman for those kids, more than just the man keeping promises to the dead. Eleanor reached for his hand, finding it calloused and strong, and held on. Then we try. We build this together. The ranch, the children's future, whatever we become. No promises beyond taking it one day at a time and being honest about what we want. What do you want? This. She gestured at the ranch, at the house where children were laughing for the first time in months, at the land Daniel had built from nothing, and they'd fought to preserve. A place that matters. Children who need teaching. And you, Cole Riker, with all your rough edges and terrible communication skills and absolute devotion to keeping promises. I want all of it. He kissed her then, unpracticed and fierce, his hands gentle despite their strength, his mouth tasting of coffee and hope and possibilities neither of them had dared imagine months ago. When they broke apart, Eleanor was breathless and smiling, and Cole's expression held wonder like he'd discovered something precious in the dust. Think those kids will accept having a teacher who's more than just a teacher? He asked. I think they'll accept whatever makes you smile like that. Eleanor leaned into him, letting his arm wrap around her shoulders. Besides, Thomas has been asking pointed questions about whether you're going to marry me. Apparently he's decided we'd be good for each other. Smart kid. Gets it from his father, and from the man who's raising him. Eleanor watched the sunset paint the world in impossible colors. We should tell them. About us staying, about us trying to build something together. They found the children in the kitchen, Maria pretending not to notice how close Cole and Eleanor stood, how their hands were linked like promises made flesh. Thomas looked up from his stew with eyes too knowing for 10, and Lily's whisper to her brother carried across the quiet room. I knew it. Told you. Miss Hayes is staying, Cole announced, his voice carrying pride in something softer. Permanently. She'll keep teaching, keep helping run the accounts, and keep arguing with me about important things. And? Thomas prompted, his grin knowing. Cole looked at Eleanor and she nodded, giving permission for truth. and we're going to see if we can build more than just a working relationship, if that's all right with you two." Lily's answer was to launch herself at both of them, her small arms wrapping around their legs in a hug that spoke volumes without sound. Thomas tried for nonchalance, but couldn't quite hide his smile. "About time. We've been waiting for you adults to figure out what was obvious." He stood, offering his hand to Cole with unexpected formality. "Pa would have liked her, I think. Would have liked knowing you weren't alone taking care of us." Cole shook the boy's hand, man to man, and Eleanor saw the weight of that gesture, acknowledging Thomas's growing maturity, honoring his opinion, treating him as partner in the decisions that shaped their collective future. Maria produced a cake she'd somehow managed to bake in anticipation of good news, and they celebrated with rare extravagance. The children stayed up late, their laughter filling spaces that had been hollow with grief for too long. Eleanor watched them, watched Cole gradually relaxing into something approaching joy, and felt the rightness of this moment settle into her bones. Later, when the children were finally asleep and Maria had retired to her own quarters, Cole and Eleanor sat on the porch beneath stars that stretched forever across the Texas sky. "This won't be easy," Cole said quietly. "Running this ranch, raising those kids, building something between us while the world watches and judges. Nothing worth having is easy. You taught me that." Eleanor laced her fingers through his. "But we've already fought the hard battles. Compared to courtrooms and rustlers, building a life together should be simple." "You have a strange definition of simple." "I have a realistic understanding of what love looks like when it's not just passion and poetry. It looks like standing together when the world says run. Like fighting for children who aren't blood because promises matter more than biology. Like choosing each other even when easier options exist." She looked at him, this hard man softened by firelight and possibility. "That's what I want, Cole. The hard, real, imperfect version of love that survives everything Texas can throw at it. Then that's what we'll build." His arm tightened around her shoulders. Together. The months that followed brought their own challenges. Rebuilding the stable, negotiating better supply contracts, managing the ranch through drought and occasional trouble. But they faced it together, Cole's strength and Eleanor's intelligence complementing each other like two parts of a machine designed to function as one. Thomas grew into his role as Daniel's heir, learning from Cole while excelling at the education Eleanor provided. By his 12th birthday, he could work cattle, read law, and articulate his vision for the ranch's future with clarity that made grown men listen. Lily emerged from her shell gradually, her whispers becoming speech, and her speech becoming song. She'd never be as bold as her brother, but her quiet strength became its own kind of power. The ranch prospered despite continuing challenges. Cole negotiated railroad access on terms that brought revenue without compromising the land's integrity. Eleanor's account management identified savings that kept them solvent through hard seasons. Together, they built something that honored Daniel's dreams while adapting to realities he couldn't have foreseen. A year after the trial, on a spring morning when the prairie bloomed with unlikely wildflowers, Cole asked Eleanor to marry him, not with poetry or grand gesture, but with rough honesty that was more valuable than any practiced speech. "I want to make this official. Want you to know that when I say forever, I mean it. Want those kids to see that family isn't just blood, it's choice and commitment and showing up every day even when it's hard." Eleanor said yes, and they married in the ranch's main room with Thomas and Lily standing witness, Maria crying happy tears, and ranch hands gathered on the porch celebrating the union of two stubborn people who'd fought their way to love through every obstacle Texas could devise. 6 years later, when Thomas turned 18 and legal control of the ranch transferred to him as Daniel's will had specified, he made his choice clear. Cole would continue managing operations, Eleanor would handle education and accounts, and Thomas would learn both roles until he was ready to take full responsibility. The ranch wasn't just surviving, it was thriving, a testament to what happened when knowledge and strength worked in tandem rather than opposition. "Pa would be proud," Thomas said on his 18th birthday, standing on the porch where his father had once stood planning futures he'd never see. "Not just of the ranch, but of what you built here, what you all became." Cole's arm was around Eleanor's waist. Their daughter, born 2 years after the wedding, balanced on his hip while Lily helped Maria in the kitchen. It was an ordinary moment, domestic and peaceful, but Eleanor understood its extraordinary nature. They'd taken fragments, broken people, grieving children, a failing ranch, and forged them into something whole. "Your father built the foundation," Eleanor said. "We just honored his vision and adapted it to survive." "No," Thomas's voice carried absolute certainty. "You did more than survive. You showed that different kinds of strength can coexist, that books and cattle ranching aren't opposites, that family is what you choose to build, not just what you're born into." He looked at them both with Daniel's eyes and his own hard-won wisdom. That's Pa's real legacy. Not just land or cattle, but the idea that we can be more than one thing, that we don't have to choose between surviving and truly living. As the sun set over land they'd bled and fought to preserve, Eleanor leaned into Cole's solid warmth and watched their children, biological and chosen, building futures on foundations of love and struggle combined. The frontier was still hard, still unforgiving, still demanded everything from those who dared to call it home. But they'd learned that hardness didn't mean cruelty, that strength came in forms beyond violence, and that sometimes the most revolutionary act was simply refusing to give up when everyone expected you to break. The ranch stood, the children thrived, and two people who'd been strangers found something neither had been looking for but both desperately needed: a place to belong, a purpose worth fighting for, and love that grew stronger through every challenge rather than despite them. It wasn't the ending Eleanor had imagined when she'd stepped off that stagecoach into smoke and chaos years ago. It was better, messier, harder, more real than any story she'd read in Boston's refined parlors. It was a life built on choices made in fire, on promises kept when breaking them would have been easier, on the stubborn insistence that knowledge and compassion mattered as much as survival. In the harsh Texas twilight, surrounded by everything they'd built and everyone they'd saved, Eleanor Hayes Riker finally understood what her father had meant about hard countries requiring harder people. Not hard in the sense of cruel or closed, but hard in the sense of unbreakable. Strong enough to care despite knowing care meant vulnerability, brave enough to build despite knowing everything could be lost. They'd come through fire and found home in the ashes. And that, Eleanor thought, as Cole's hand found hers and held on, was the truest kind of victory, not the absence of struggle, but the presence of people worth struggling for, and the absolute certainty that no matter what came next, they'd face it together. The frontier had tried to break them. Instead, they'd become exactly what it demanded, and something more: survivors who'd learned to truly live, fighters who'd discovered what was worth the fight, and two hard people who'd found the courage to be soft with each other while remaining strong enough to protect what mattered. In the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.